hit internet videos was like still quaint and funny and strange.
Chocolate. Wait a second.
Chocolate rain. Dum ba dum bum 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 bum. This young kid, he had his awesome voice, and every time he breathed in, he would turn away from, and somebody did a dub over that and made a meme out of it. And they sing, "I turn away from the mic to breathe in chocolate rain." Anyway,
that's hilarious. I think I missed that.
But this is in the era of like, do you remember Lazy Sunday? That was one of the first major hit by Lonely Island on Saturday Night Live, and they did a rap about the Chronic, what coals of Narnia. The Chronic, what coal, and that's like, I don't know, 2003, 2004, when like ironic,
like Chris Parnell, I think, yeah,
exactly, and Chocolate Rain. This is like that era when like meme still wasn't a mainstream word yet.
Oh, right.
And the whole idea of a meme catching on virally was still like new and quaint and funny. Anyway.
Go ahead and breathe. We breathe on this podcast.
Okay.
A toast.
A toast.
Prost.
Prost. Cheers, Mike.
Cheers. Oh, man, that's good.
Yeah.
Grappa.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Thanks for making some time in your schedule. It's been crazy 2 years for the opera singing world, and we're sort of slowly coming back to normal, although many things aren't even close to being normal, it seems.
Yeah. We're still getting cancellations. I had a job lined up to begin in February, and that was completely pushed, I don't know, 2 years in the future or so. So things are still pretty open.
Yeah.
For better or for worse.
Yeah, I had a Rigoletto in January that was pushed back until June.
Oh, yeah?
So, it's crazy.
Okay.
And, we were just talking about this jump-in I did last week in Bavaria. The audience, it was a small theater already. I think it was only maybe 900, 800 seats. Okay. And on top of that, the Bavaria Corona rules are still social distancing.
In the seating, right?
In the seating.
So like you had to have like a seat in between people or something?
2 seats.
Right.
2 seats in between people.
And if you do that in every direction, that is the row behind and the row in front, then you can actually you don't get to half capacity. You get to like 1/3 capacity.
This was this is just an eyeball guess from the stage. I would say it was 25%.
Yeah. I've seen that before.
It was pretty crazy. Yeah. But they were very appreciative. Look, people want to go back to the theater. They want to see some, they missed their live opera.
Yeah, I'm sure that's an interesting like geometric puzzle where you sit down with the map of the seating chart and they're like, in order to follow the rules and have everybody, 150 centimeters away from each other, how can we get maximum capacity and still have everybody that far? And that'd be an interesting little puzzle game to figure out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be curious what little, mathematician they'd pull in to do that.
Yeah, they got a seating chart.
And but apparently that even if you only have people only a seat away from each other, your first assumption is, we'll be at half capacity. No, if you have, 150 centimeters to the next person in every 360 degrees around you, then the seating, it gets dramatically reduced. How many butts you can put in seats.
It's crazy about what they're doing not crazy, but let's say interesting, what they're doing in Germany, whereas now it's more about like the Landkreis, the actual like local government that is sort of making the rules. Yeah. And of course, if you've got private businesses making their own rules as well. But when it comes to like a national theater or a regional theater, a Staatstheater or something like that, it's up to the Landkreis.
Yeah.
And
I wouldn't be surprised if they're big enough and important enough, they may be in the room with the mayor when they're talking about that. When, some of the, the larger businesses are in there saying, look, we really need this. Can we do the rules this way? And I wouldn't be surprised if in Berlin, if the Berlin Operstiftung or somebody that represents all of the operas and theaters and stuff is in that room being like, look, if we did the rule this way, it would really save us, X amount of money or something.
Yeah, I mean, geez, we can only guess what's going on like behind the scenes, in the conference rooms of these local governments and stuff like that. But
this is an interesting, eye-opening thing for me too, because when I was looking into this and reading up on the Marshall Plan and post-war Germany, they very consciously created a federated system for Germany. And like the United States, where states' rights is a big thing. And so you have numerous Bundesländer, numerous states within Germany, and each of these Bundesländer has a lot of power to set their rules separate from the federal government. Right. And that tension between the state governors or the state governments and the federal government is something that happens here as well as it does in the United States.
Interesting.
And so you can go from you could go from Sachsen to Bavaria to Berlin to North Rhine-Westphalia, and they're going to have different rules from place to place.
Yeah.
And it can be perceived as disunity, but the argument in favor of that is, the typical states' rights. That each one gets to experiment and do what's best for them by the local politicians, representing that area.
Right. Yeah. I mean, really, it's a good way to go, I think, for Germany, because you have these very densely populated areas, and you have these areas that are just more open, more spread out. And I mean, the same rules just don't apply. You got to have a little bit of flexibility there. So. Yeah. And I mean, of course, they're always going by the numbers.
Yes.
So, yeah. But, like I said, things are slowly kind of coming back to normal. I mean, in Berlin, you can hardly notice because, I saw things in the last couple months at all three A houses. I saw your nose.
Oh, yeah.
The nose at I should call it Barry Kosky's Komische Oper.
Yeah. but I think he's leaving at the end of the season.
That's right. Yeah. So, shout out to Barry.
But yeah, it's awesome. It's a very costly Festspiele right now where they're doing. Oh my gosh, they're doing so many productions and they're warming them up so quickly. The ensemble has so much work to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're bringing up all sorts of his shows this year before he goes.
So they checked my Impfpass when I went in there, like my vaccination card.
Yeah.
And then I went to the Staatsoper, same thing. They just checked my vaccination card, and Deutsche Oper saw Götterdämmerung there.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing, but there was no social distancing.
Yeah.
There was none of that. You only had to, I guess and then even when you were sitting in your seat, you could take your mask off. They asked you to put your mask on when you applaud.
But this is more like November, right? This is before Omicron.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what they're doing now, actually.
Okay.
I mean, I hope to go see, a movie tonight, and I'm wondering, I think maybe you have to wear a mask through the whole movie now, but I'm not clear on that. I'll have to read up on that.
Yeah, the movie theaters. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. We went to see No Time to Die now it's been a couple months.
Yeah, you know what? I saw Dido and Aeneas at Staatsoper just a week or two ago, and that was not distanced. Everybody's sitting next to each other, but wore masks the whole time.
Right, and checked your pass when you went in.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy, but things are slowly kind of coming back. When did you first move to Germany?
I came here almost exactly 11 years ago. I did a sort of audition tour where I saved up money and I planned 3 months because, Americans, we can stay here for 3 months on a sort of vacation visa or whatever, visitor's visa.
Tourist visa or something.
Tourist visa.
Yeah.
And so from like February, March, April of 2011 is when I first came here and sang for the agents, and some of those agents sent me to some house auditions, and one of those auditions worked out. One, where I fit the need that theater had at that time. And so, but from April, so like May and June, I quickly, threw away, sold, or gave away most of my stuff in my apartment in New York City, got everything down to about 3 suitcases, and within 6 weeks came back to start rehearsals for Marriage of Figaro in like June of 2011.
And which theater was that?
That was Theater Krefeld Mönchengladbach. That's a sort of double theater where a single theater serves 2 cities and has a lot of buses between back and forth.
Yeah.
Right. So most of the Schauspieler live in Krefeld, but most of the, soloist singers live in Gladbach. A lot of the orchestra lives in Krefeld, and depending on which thing is going to rehearse where, it's just a lot of buses back and forth. So, that's there over in the west. Like, Mönchengladbach is where I lived. It's about 40 clicks from the Netherlands border. It's pretty far west.
Right.
And there's a very high concentration of theaters around Nordrhein-Westfalen over there in the west. So you've got, Essen, Dortmund, Düsseldorf, Cologne, Aachen, Gelsenkirchen. These are all within like 90 minutes of each other.
Right.
It's a lot of theaters over there.
Right.
And this is one of them.
Yeah, many of them are A houses.
Yeah.
Which is, something that just always blows my mind. That you can have these big opera houses so close to each other because, we grew up in the States.
Yeah.
You've got Houston Grand in the South. You've got the Metropolitan in the East, Washington Opera, Chicago in the Midwest. And then on the West Coast, San Francisco and LA. And those are the biggest opera houses in the country.
Yeah.
And they're...
Yeah, you get like one big house per 6-state region or something. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And here in Berlin, we have 3 A houses. And, even if they have performances all in the same night, they're virtually sold out.
Yeah.
If not sold out, they're virtually sold out. And, they can easily do that by bringing in, Jose Cura to sing, Roberto Alagna to sing, Anna Netrebko. And, it can be one of Barry Kosky's big productions at Komische Oper. And, bingo, you've sold out.
Yeah, just a week or two ago, I was scrolling through the website. I think it's Stiftung Oper Berlin. But in this single website, they just listed all of the performances happening at all 3 houses in one page. And it is remarkable. And so I just made a video real quick and sent it to some of my friends saying, guys, look at this. And so this is the middle of January. So let's say it's January 16th. And I said, I'm just going to scroll to the end of January. And I scrolled a page, and I scrolled another page, and I scrolled another page, and another page of all of these, dozens of performances happening in the 2-week period. From the middle of January to the end of January, which included, ballet and the numerous opera performances, both big and small, from these 3 opera houses. And that probably doesn't include the other, like, mixed media, off-Broadway kind of stuff, or Oper Neukölln, or stuff like that.
Neukölln, there's a couple.
There's just so in the country at large and in the city, there's just so much work. Yeah. There's so many performances. And something I often tell my friends, it's not just that there are more houses. Even a supposedly small house is going to operate 10 and a half months a year. And they're going to do at least opera and symphony, if not ballet and Schauspiel also, 10 and a half months a year. There's really kind of like one house in the United States that does that, and that's the Met.
Right.
Where they're just pumping out tons of productions all year long.
And I'm not sure they still do this, but they used to take like a winter pause, and they would have like the Bolshoi.
Oh, right. Was that at the Met?
Ballet come in at the Met to do the Nutcracker.
Oh, okay. I
I
think
don't know if they still do. I
I've
think
been
they
away.
don't.
I've been away for so long, but I remember seeing posters for Bolshoi in the summer. Pause.
Oh, okay, maybe they do it then.
Pause. I'm so.
I know.
We're saying pause.
Yeah, you said
Americans don't say that.
You said Schauspieler earlier, and I'm wondering if
I need to explain these
my
things.
poor mother's listening, and she's going, "What's a Schauspieler?" It's an actor. Schauspielers are actors.
Yeah, what do we call what's the correct like English term for like actors who but are not in opera? Like sometimes we say straight actors, but that's not. I don't know.
Theater, I guess, theater actors as opposed to
Like legit
movie.
theater, straight theater,
Yeah.
stage, whatever. There's
Stage
a correct
actor.
term for that.
Yeah, stage actor.
That is Schauspiel.
Yeah, that's Schauspiel. So what was your motivation for, or your inspiration for coming and doing the audition tour in the first place?
Yeah, well, honestly, I was getting towards like a breaking point in my, career or lack of career in the United States. So I had already lived in New York for 10 or 11 years. And in the United States, as you know, a lot of singers almost have to get started in New York, or it helps a great deal to live there or near there when you're getting started because all the auditions are there. And it's a lot easier to do that than to try to drive or fly around to auditions. So I was doing the sort of New York singer thing.
Yep.
And I'm living there and hoping to get an agent. And honestly, there's just this decade of my life where I was so driven, just single track mind. I had blinders on. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this work. I am going to be a successful soloist opera singer who makes enough money to support himself doing this. And that was not happening.
Right. I'm pretty
And-
sure that's where we met because I was there from 01 to 08.
Yeah, like I think we
Through
met.
David
we
Adam
played.
Moore. Shout out to David.
Yeah,
I think we met through him.
Did you
And
do
Skip.
the Bohème Broadway?
Yep.
Okay, and I think you might have come over and played poker at our place.
Yeah, I think so.
So that would have been another time that we met.
Right, right.
Back in like 02 or 03.
Yep.
And so I spent, I attended school there, and I went to the Juilliard Opera Center, and then I was already moved there. So I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this thing. And, I had like 1 year where it's like, okay, I'm making enough to support myself doing gigs at very small institutions, making pretty low pay compared to the other fellow singers, but enough. And then the crash of '07 came.
Right.
And not only
Yeah, it was
was
really
it
like more 08, 09.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the big financial crash came, and not only was, music work hard to come by and houses were shutting down, but it was hard for me to even just get the temp work that I had been doing to get by. But essentially, in the decade that I spent in New York, it was often hit and miss. I would do some really cool gigs. I got this awesome gig working with the Wooster Group, with this crazy, awesome experimental theater group that did this funky, very hard to describe, mixed media production of La Didone by Callisto. So this is early Baroque version of the Dido and Aeneas story by the Italian composer. And
This is new to me. I
And
don't know this piece.
they did
Great.
this production with 4 actors and 4 singers, which was run at the same time as this kind of reenactment of a 1960s sci-fi B movie, Planet of the Vampires or
Okay.
something. And so there's this awesome, like kind of weird campy thing going on, and the actors are reciting lines from the movie, and then we'll come in and we work, and we rehearsed for months. Sorry, I could talk about this forever, but we rehearsed
That's
for like
okay. This is long form. So
5 or 6 months of
elaborate.
rehearsal.
Yeah. Wow.
And we worked Baroque movement for months and months. Anyway, I got to do some really cool gigs, but it was never like enough, like back to back to back, to really put together a living financially. And I reached a breaking point where I was like, either I'm going to be a singer somewhere else, or I'll stay in New York and go in a different direction career-wise,
Yeah.
but I won't be a singer in New York.
Right.
This is destroying me.
Right.
It's so soul-killing to really dedicate your life to whatever your idea of success is in a particular venue and just not succeed in doing it, and to feel like a failure. And I was really facing these feelings, and I finally reached a point where I'm like, all right, there's going to be a change. And there was a moment when I was interviewing for an administrative spot at Google in New York City.
Okay.
And interviewing for that was like trying to get into the CIA. I did like 4 interviews for an admin spot.
Wow. What year was this?
It was 2009, 2010.
Okay, so they were just sort of taking off.
Well, they were big by 2010.
Okay.
Because they started in the late 90s.
Right.
Like Alta Vista was the big deal in
Right.
97.
Yeah.
And so they were already big. They were already in billions in revenue by then.
Okay.
And I'm just interviewing for an admin spot. I had to study like LSATs and take a logic test.
Oh my gosh.
I filled out some essays for like an hour or two. I interviewed all the way up until I interviewed some of the VPs in marketing that I potentially would be working for. And I was really excited because I love technology.
Yeah.
Like I read technology blogs for like an hour or 2 or 3 every day. I just love following that whole world.
Right.
And so I was like this close, and who knows where I'd be now if I had, gotten that job, because I would have gladly taken that and get a regular paycheck working this awesome company, and or awesome at the time. I think everybody's looking at tech companies differently now that we see the sort of privacy nightmare we're in. That's a whole nother issue.
Yeah, it's always like a soundbite. Like somebody brings up like what was the Google motto?
Don't be evil.
Yeah.
Don't be evil.
Don't be evil or yeah.
That was part of like their corporate, thing that the founders.
And it was just that mantra. There was nothing else.
Yeah.
But now you can look it up. You can Google it, and it's like a long thing. And then like the last line is, "And by the way, don't be evil."
And by the way, don't be evil. Yeah.
Which I think is just great.
Yeah.
But of course, it includes like the P word. Profit.
Yeah, increasing shareholder value. So
Exactly.
in any case, I did numerous interviews, and it really looked like I had a shot at getting this job, and it did not come through, and I was so crushed, and I was like, look, all right, I'm going to save up my money, I'm going to do whatever I can, and I'll give a shot at going to Germany, because I was ready for just a major change. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened. That's what I got. I got a Fest position, and everything changed.
So you started out at Mönchengladbach, Krefeld Mönchengladbach. That's a mouthful.
It is, man.
And they offered you the Fest position right away.
Yeah.
Describe the differences for people who don't know. There's 2 kinds of performance contracts, I guess, especially for opera singers. There's the Fest angestellt, which is what you got. Fest just means fixed, right?
Yeah.
And there's the Gastvertrag, which is a guest contract. And describe the differences between those.
Yeah. So in the German-speaking countries and in some of the larger theaters outside the German-speaking countries, you can have this possibility to get a salary where you are the house lyric tenor. You are the house coloratura soprano. You have a position and you do roles with that house all year long.
Right.
And you are paid a salary. You get the same paycheck every month. You have worker protections, health care, retirement, et cetera, and you just work at that house all year long.
Right.
And most of the rest of the entire opera world is freelance. Mm-hmm. And we're just contractors that do gig after gig after gig with a lot of travel. And so, if you were a relatively successful freelance singer in another part of the world, then you do one role in one city, and then you have 3 weeks off, and then you do this role in another city, and you have 2 months off, and then you suddenly do 2 roles back to back, and it's a lot of travel, a lot of suitcases, and a fest position allows you to just live in one city, and you do numerous roles in that city. And essentially, I would say a fest position is low risk or lower risk and less money, less income. And a freelance career is higher risk, higher income, generally.
Right.
But also in a fest, if you get sick, you just get a doctor's note.
Right.
And you just don't show up. And that's that. And if you're a guest and you get sick, you're mortified.
Yeah, because it's pay to play, so you don't get your fee.
Yeah, no holla, no dollar. If you don't, because most of singers' freelance fees are negotiated where you get maybe some payment for rehearsal, maybe zero for rehearsal.
Yeah, usually zero.
So where the meat of the work might happen for 3, 4, 6 weeks, but the pay is the shows.
Right.
And a payment per show. You don't do that show, there's no payment.
Right.
And a very... here's a story I often refer to. A dear friend of mine, this is a while ago, several years ago, had lined up numerous lucrative gigs back to back to back, doing a leading role at an opera house, doing a concert with a symphony, and maybe another role. And just woke up one morning and a virus just went boom right on their vocal folds that morning. They hadn't really done anything wrong. They just woke up sick and just had an infection right on the vocal folds. They had laryngitis. There's nothing you can do but just shut up and wait. But that person lost 50% of their annual income because that was where all the lucrative gigs were happening for that year. And that's when the illness landed. And this is the risk of the freelance career. Right. But I was fest and I broke my left ankle. And I couldn't come to work for 6 weeks. And that's their problem. They have to find a replacement and pay my replacement to go on stage for me, and that is their problem. I have workers' comp, I have unemployment insurance, I have all that stuff. So I keep getting, I get my full paycheck for 6 weeks, and if I'm sick beyond that, I still get, 80, 90% of my paycheck beyond that. And that, and maternal leave or just you need leave for personal reasons or psychological issues that you need to work on. And
pregnancy.
So there's safety in that. I do want to put an asterisk or a caveat on that, because sometimes as an outsider, you think, oh, you get a salaried position and then you're good. You just stay. And that's not really true. You are still not safe because most contracts, even fest contracts, are usually a year long. Yeah. Now, they might be 2, they might be 3, and in some exceptional cases, you might negotiate 5 or something. But I was always renewed each year. Right. And so when I say safe, that means a year of safety at a time, where somebody new could come into management, or somebody could just be like, no, we're not happy with this guy, we think we can do better. And you're let go. Right. And so there is a sort of a funny kind of ironic thing. I remember one of the first singers I worked with in Germany was like, you know what, I can be freelance, but I know that I can just keep living in Munich and just travel to my gigs, and I can keep my home. But I could be fest in a place, and then they do an Intendantswechsel. That would be a changing of the Intendant, and the Intendant is the head honcho of the entire operation, symphony, ballet, theater, opera. And if that person changes, they could flush a great deal of employees on the changeover, the new one. Right. The new one could be like, you know what, I got my favorite singers and they're all coming. Right. We'll keep you and the rest, you're fired. Right. And this happens all the time.
Yeah, it's very common.
And so it turns out that the people in management and administration are very ambitious like the singers are. A lot of us singers are kind of looking for the next big thing, the next big step up. Well, a lot of them are too.
Right.
And so there are many houses that will change management in a 5-year cycle.
Yep. Yeah, their intendants have like 3 to 5 year contracts or something like that, and if they're not renewed, then a new one comes in, and they can clean house.
Yeah,
Really.
and that happens often. So a lot of the mobility that happens in ensembles in theaters is from an Intendantwechsel, where if you had an ensemble of 18 and they got rid of 16, those 16 are looking for work, and then there's 16 openings at that theater. So safe with an asterisk.
Right. There is a way to become, their version of tenured, which they call
Unkündbar.
Unkündbar.
Uncancelable.
Yes. And you reach that by doing, is it consecutive years?
I think it is 14 is the magic number.
14, right. And of course, there's been some abuse of that as well, because there have been theaters who will go unnamed in this podcast because we try to keep it positive, who will employ a singer for 13 consecutive seasons,
Yes.
and before the 14th, fire them.
Yeah, I'm acquainted with at least 3 people that's happened to right now, and one that happened to just last year. It is a very commonplace thing. And so they'll have a singer who faithfully serves for 13 years, and if they keep him for the 14th, it's like, well, now we got to keep you forever.
Yeah.
And so often they will not.
And in opposition to that, there has been some hacking or abuse from singers as well. I am familiar with a soprano who was fessed at a house who took her maternity leave consecutively.
What, did she get pregnant like twice, one after the other?
She got pregnant twice, one after the other. And so she basically didn't work but got a full paycheck for over a year. I think it was close to 18 months.
Oh, but what do you mean? What do you mean consecutively? There's 2 pregnancies?
2 pregnancies.
Well, that could have
to
been
back.
3 years.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 years. It could have been 3 years.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Not exactly sure on the time she
'cause
took off, but I know it was over a year.
I don't know the rules, but I think the mother will can get a year fully,
Okay.
and maybe extend it under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
And if 2 pregnancies consecutively, that could be 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. So there is some sort of hacking and abuse from the singer's side as well. Also, I've worked at companies where they have enormous ensembles.
Yeah.
And the reason they're enormous is because you get, a handful or 2 handfuls of singers who become unkündbar, and they just decide they're not going to leave. And maybe they're a tenor and they started out as like maybe a lead tenor or a lead baritone.
Yeah.
But now in their later years, they're not able to sing lead tenor roles anymore. They're not able to sing lead baritone roles anymore. And so the opera house has to sort of double down. They have to pay these people, they have to pay the singers, and they have to hire a guest.
Yeah.
Or bring in another ensemble member and expand the ensemble.
Yeah.
So there has been some abuse, in all fairness, and so you can see sort of where the theaters come in and they say, well, we don't want to grant people, the unkündbar status. Which is
feel
sad.
torn
I wish
about
there
it.
was some legal recourse where maybe some kind of outside force can come in, or some kind of body of government that can come in and at least analyze the situation, especially if it's like, I see, it happens very often with dramatic voices. You'll have an ensemble member who's been there for 13 years and they've bled on stage, sometimes literally, singing roles like Tosca, singing roles like Scarpia, these really big roles that require a unique voice.
Yeah.
And then, the theater maybe maybe hearing some decline in their voice and thinking, well, we just can't make this person unkundbar, just because maybe they've only got 2 more years of good singing left, and then they're stuck in the ensemble. We can't fire them, and we can't really use them for anything.
Yeah.
Except for, like, you know, the character roles in Die Lustige Witwe or something, you know?
Yeah.
So it seems like there should be...
I feel torn about it.
Yeah,
I feel
it's
torn
definitely
about
an
it.
issue.
Where,
it's definitely something we need to talk about.
especially coming from, you know, the struggle that I had come from, and, you know, our lives are hard enough as it is, and there's so much financial insecurity and risk, and so I want singers to have some safety and dignity, especially later in life, and yet, you know, professors can get better and better and better with age.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that's right.
If you are a purely academic in your work, then, you know, the point to which you decline is only going to be if you decline mentally for any reason late in life. You know, other than that, you're only going to get better. This is not true for athletes. This is not true, and it's not true for singers.
Very few.
And so, you know, there are some basses who could still kind of do, you know, bouncy, whatever, buffo bass rep until, you know, they got a foot in the grave, and some of them do.
Right.
But not all of us are just going to keep getting better and better.
Right.
And so that's a tough decision for a house. If I were the boss, like, I really want to be the guy who's going to support and defend the singers. But if it was my call, that would be hard in some spots to think, well, you know, this person isn't going to keep getting better the rest of their lives. And so what's best in the interest of the house, in the interest of, you know, making the best art that we can. Some singers can gracefully transition to a different Fach, you know, and if they were a Tosca before, they could start doing maybe mezzo rep. And if they're really good actors and they're flexible, then maybe they might start doing some of the buffo or comprimario stuff where they're actually good at comedy.
Exactly.
And in some cases, and I don't know if this is countrywide or city by city or theater by theater, but in some theaters, the house can just ask them to transition to office work. And that happens. So they're still, they're unkundbar. They stay with the theater, but not as a singer.
Wow, I never heard of that. That's great.
Or go into the chorus.
Sure.
So that's another option. That isn't like, we have to kick you out to the street. It's like, we'll keep you on. But, you know, if I recall correctly, it's possible the position that opened for me in my first Fest theater was because a bass baritone previous to me was transitioned into the office.
Okay, interesting.
And that created an opening for another bass baritone.
Yeah, and people may have heard the term Kammersänger.
Yes,
and that a Kammersänger or a Kammersängerin is when you become unkundbar. Is that correct?
I'm not, and I think I think the Venn diagram is even narrower than that.
Okay.
Like it's almost like, I need to do research in this. I do not know the answer, but my impression, the few times I've met a Kammersänger, it's almost like they got a medal for service.
Right.
So like when the Oscars do, you know, a lifetime award for somebody, that's sometimes what happens, or it's a very special assignation.
Yeah.
Usually to one
right
singer in the ensemble.
I think, I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of names who are Kammersingers at the moment, and I can only think of one, Renee Papa at Staatsoper Berlin.
Yeah. Like I just worked with one at Komische. It was Jens, is our bass in the nose that you saw.
Aha,
He's
okay.
a Kammersänger at Komische Oper, for example. And there was,
now I know too.
there was a guest that I worked with in Mönchengladbach, and she did her first Norma with us, one of the best sopranos I had heard, and she was Kammersängerin in Karlsruhe.
Oh, okay.
As well, and so I'm unclear on this. We need to ask if my girlfriend Amelie was here, she could tell us in detail what it is. But it seems to be more of like, almost like a government designation, like a medal of service.
Yeah, it's almost like a political position.
An honorary, an honorary title.
Yeah.
And that is beyond simply being tenured or unkundbar.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Definitely pretty cool. So you got the fest then in 2011.
Yes.
And how long did you have that fest?
I was in the fest for 7 seasons. And
Wow, that's great.
yeah. And here's the interesting thing with the whole, renewal of the contract.
Yeah,
every year.
was it one year each?
Every time. So I got my visa renewed. I would go to the Ausländerbehörde. I would go to the foreigner's office every year and bring my passport and my new renewed contract and say, I've been renewed another year. Can I get a visa for another year?
Right.
Because I'd only have a visa if I was employed. And then at the 5-year mark, I could get my permanent visa, which I now very happily have.
Right.
And don't have to do that paperwork every year. But yes, it was always a year at a time. I mean, maybe I would have gotten more if I pushed for it. I just never did. Mm-hmm. And so it was my 7th season. Here's the deal with either deciding to leave or being fired from a fest position. It's both helpful and awkward. Halloween, October 31st, is the cutoff date where management has to say you're staying or you're leaving.
Right.
And most of the houses have a very prescribed way where this has to happen. They have to meet with you face to face. They have to say, we're terribly sorry, but we're letting you go. And for these reasons, they have to tell you why. They don't just get to say you're fired. And I think like maybe in face and maybe in writing, they officially let you go, and they have to do it before October 31st. So the upside of this is you've got the whole rest of the season till the summer to look for your next engagement. The weird thing is you're still working for people who fired you from, November to June. And in some cases that can be kind of weird. And similarly for the soloists, if you're thinking of leaving the fest, you're supposed to let them know before the end of August that it is your plan to go, and you're going to leave your contract. You do not wish to be renewed.
So before the season starts, that August? No,
Sorry,
the August before.
Sorry, did
Do
I
you
say
mean October?
October?
Oh, okay. So the same date, October 31st
Yes,
or something.
Same date.
Okay.
So similarly,
that makes
if you
sense.
want to leave, you need to give notice. Now, this rule is very flexible, and depending on how open-minded and forgiving your management is, I've seen many singers get a great offer late in the season, and they make
exceptions.
This is not a rule, but most, Operndirektor and intendants and bosses, if they know that the offer is obviously better for the singer, that they get an offer at a theater that is clearly bigger or step up for them, then generally they'll always let them go. They'll let them out of that contract.
Okay.
They don't have to. They could just say, "No, we're forcing you to stay.
We own you.
You didn't cancel in time, so you're on." So on November 1st, you're verlängert, you're extended all the way through the next season. Right. So,
Amazing.
you on November 1st, 2012, you're still going to finish the 12-13 season, and you're contracted through the 13-14 season.
Right. It's hard to look for other positions when you're in a fest. Because in order just to leave town, you have to get written permission from the theater.
Yeah.
So in a case like you're probably working in multiple shows at the same time. One in performance and maybe 2 in rehearsals or something like that. One or 2 in rehearsals. So your schedule is packed.
Yeah.
So if you go to them and say, look, I want to do an audition in Karlsruhe or Frankfurt or something like that, they've got you. It's totally up to them whether they want to release you, because inevitably you'll be missing some rehearsal to go and do an audition, and it's quite hard, is it not? I mean, other people have told me that too.
Yeah, a great deal depends on your boss and and the management style of that boss and the relationship you have with that boss. So mine was my boss was a really nice fellow in Mönchengladbach, and I think he really tried to be flexible with particularly with auditions, and if you're a responsible singer and you're prepared and you work hard when you're supposed to work, and rehearsals are 6 weeks long,
right?
If you miss a day, it's not going to be the end of the world. So I often, when I asked for a release for an audition, I was often granted it.
Oh, that's great. That's great to hear.
But I was also kind of, how do I say it? I'm going to say I was kind of American. And here's what I mean by that. Then this is a whole nother issue, but Americans who grow up in trying to be freelance singers in America, we're grateful for every sniff of work we get.
Yeah,
and we'll work gangbusters for it. And to be successful at all is so rare and so difficult. Mm-hmm. And there's something in and I appreciate this, that in the German culture, management and your fellow colleagues and workers, they really respect the worker's right. And if you call in sick, or if you're a little under the weather, or something's going on and you need time off, then that's kind of not questioned. Whereas in America, it'd be like, well, do you want the work or not?
Yeah.
You're going to come in or not?
Yeah.
And I appreciate here that, like, if somebody says they're sick, and that's not questioned. And that could invite some abuse of the system, where people call in sick when they're not. But
they need a doctor's note.
Yeah, but you have to get a doctor who do that for you.
So, it's especially a doctor working in Germany, they're not likely to forge something for you unless they're like a family, really good friend or maybe like your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or mom. Sorry, don't want to be sexist.
Yeah, no. You could still, at least in some of the fest positions I've seen and the one that I was in, you could, without a doctor's note, just say, I am sick today for 2 days.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And I never, ever abused that. Like, I would be up for whatever. And if I had a bad day, and I very rarely get sick, and I've almost never missed performances other than breaking my ankle.
Right.
And so I think I earned some leniency.
Okay, that's great.
In that regard. But it can be hard. It could be hard vocally. What if you rehearsed a role 7 hours the previous day, and you're gonna sing an audition the next morning,
right?
Or take a 6-hour train somewhere. But at least you have some paychecks and security while you're searching for the next thing. I continued to live in that city for the next year because they asked me to come back as a guest to sing a particular role the following year. So I stayed an 8th season, really, and lived there while doing some little freelance bits here and there and concerts here and there during that 8th year. And then...
And now you've been freelance since 2019, I guess?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was freelance for a bit, and then the pandemic hit.
Okay.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah. It was around, and things started going well. I kind of had a bit of a vocal breakthrough around the December of 2019, and I started winning more of my auditions. How do we say that?
Yeah.
Like I got an offer from a higher percentage of my auditions.
Yeah, that's great.
And so things started lining up, and then the pandemic came. Yeah. So a lot of these things keep getting canceled or just pushed to a future date. Man, this whole pandemic thing is so depressing on so many levels, but when Clay Hilley was in here the other day, the same thing happened to him. I mean, fortunately, he's in a Fach where, he's a Helden tenor, and he just turned 40. But he was... That's young.
Yeah, he was, 38 and a half, and he was starting to go from the cover position to the main stage. we're all impatient, and especially him. He's a real savant when it comes to music. He started out as a major in piano, so he plays beautifully. If you check out the last podcast, he did some bonus material where he sat at the piano here and accompanied himself.
Man, I'm
singing
jealous.
Vesti la Juba and Winterstürmer from Die Walküre. I mean, it was just unbelievable, and I mean, the freaking walls were shaking in here. It was incredible. But yeah, it's hard to fathom.
So he started really getting on the on-ramp and elevating.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic.
And then suddenly it was like the door slammed. And it was really, just right place at right time, where he jumped back into the ring here in Berlin, and he sang Siegfried in Götterdämmerung and in Siegfried.
Man,
so
at Deutsche Oper?
At Deutsche Oper, yeah.
Ooh-wee. Wow.
Yeah. And now, of course, things are lining up.
Yeah. Well, that's when I try to explain this to outsiders, I call it a supply and demand issue. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of us opera singers would just say, tenors, and roll their eyes or whatever. Because,
right.
But there's a supply and demand issue at work. And I think a lot of opera singers don't know this, but I read a statistic once, and I should source this before I say it, but whatever.
Go ahead, say it.
That
we can bullshit a little bit.
That 75 or 80% of the performances in the world are Wagner, Verdi, Puccini, and the Mozart de Ponti operas.
I can believe that.
I can believe that too.
Sure.
Look at any opera house, certainly in the States, that get through an entire year without doing one Puccini opera.
Very few.
Very few. Somebody's going to do a Bohème or a Tosca or
Butterfly.
Or a Butterfly.
Right.
And so that it cannot be overstated what a huge majority of all rep being performed everywhere is Verdi, Wagner, Puccini. Mm-hmm. And you need specialists to do this rep.
That's right.
Not everybody is built for this.
That's right.
And so you have very high demand where this is just beloved, exalted repertoire, and very low supply of people who do it well. And so the true Heldentenors, the true dramatics, the true spintos or lyrico spintos, sopranos, tenors, baritones, whatever, that is a low supply and a very high demand rep, and they do well financially.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you have to make yourself available for those things as well. If you're, like you mentioned, you were in New York and just to survive, you had to get some temp work, some office work, stuff like that.
Yeah, I worked in a bank. I installed, home theaters and home security systems. I did custom home install. I was temping as admin, blah, 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 and I had to do this stuff in a sort of mix to kind of keep my head above water.
Yeah, but you had to come to Germany where roles like that, where there is more opera to really, be in the right place.
Yeah.
At the right time in your life.
And I think there's just the way I phrase it is that there's more opportunities for us mere mortals, and that you don't have to be like this extremely rare. You can just be, good to great, and there's somewhere for you to fit in. And not just perfect.
I think maybe I know, I don't know, less than 10 singers who in the U.S. stayed just singers during this pandemic. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody had to find a side hustle.
Yeah.
So
I started looking at other options, not out of necessity, but out of an issue of kind of life fulfillment.
Yeah.
I told you this before, but I applied to and was accepted into a master's program and a school called the Cologne Game Lab, where I started working on a master's in game design.
Yeah, this is one thing I talked to you. I wanted to get into this with you, and that is your computer science background, which is pretty awesome.
Well, I'm not a coder, not really. So I don't want to give anybody impression that
Before we get into this, I need another grappa.
Oh, here it comes.
Thanks, my man.
Wait, maybe I should pour it for the ASMR followers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's see if we can get the sounds here.
Glug, 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 glug. Thanks, my man.
But you know what? Actually, I did study code at a very young age, and this is very rare for people of my generation. But when I was a kid in the 80s, my school actually got a bunch of Apple II computers when personal computers were still rare and expensive.
Yeah.
And I actually learned some basic programming, and I really caught onto it pretty quickly. I think I definitely had a mind for that, and had I stuck with it, I'm sure my life would have gone in a very different direction, but I went into choir instead.
Yeah, good. We're all thankful for that.
But I always had this interest in stories and writing and fantasy and sci-fi and games and game design, and how do you make a game that is enveloping and interesting and the sort of a system in a world that is engaging. And I thought, well, you know, why not do that? Why only be a singer my whole life? Not that I wanted to change careers. Mm-hmm. I really like this career when I have work, but I also have other interests, and I don't think we should only ever have to be one thing. Yeah, there's
a stigma, isn't there? It's sort of like, you know, you do something else, and maybe you post a couple things on Facebook or something like that, and then sort of there's this collective idea that, like, oh, Eric's not singing anymore. He's posting pictures of himself playing ice hockey. I guess he's playing ice hockey now.
Yeah.
And that's his gig. I was like, what? No.
Yeah. There's a romantic narrative, several that I disagree with. One of which is, you know, every person has one talent and one calling in life, and they just got to find that calling. And I really disagree with this.
Hell yeah.
And I understand that it's romantic. It's appealing in the same way of finding your soulmate romantically is appealing. That's a whole nother podcast to do. But this idea that we have like this one talent and this one calling, and we're going to find our talent and then we will be fulfilled, that's really not true. And particularly, in my opinion, for opera singers who are any good at opera singing, the list of skills you have to do it well. So imagine that you're an outsider that doesn't know anything about opera, and somebody says to you, you must now recite 2.5 hours of text in a language you don't really speak that well. You must be very convincing in your delivery of this French or Russian or German text. You must have acting skills that are at least good enough to keep the director from screaming at you.
Yeah.
You must have musical skills that must keep the maestro from screaming at you.
Exactly.
And if you lose track musically, that's why we call it a train wreck. It's different from losing track in straight theater where you're delivering lines, and if you forget a line, you could just kind of improvise your way back on. The music's the music. So memorizing hours of blocking and action that you have to do, and text and music, and performing it under pressure for hundreds or thousands of people, to honestly the snobbiest music fans on the planet, who are really can be very difficult and judgmental, and are kind of coming in there, crossing their arms on their chest and saying, "All right, let's see what you can do, kid."
Yeah. There are some of those.
So if you're capable of doing this well at all, then you have lots of things that you could do well.
Right.
You know, that could be performance-oriented or translation-oriented, or maybe you're great at teaching. Maybe you would be perfect in human resources because of your collaborative capabilities. There could be
social skills,
dozens of things.
Organizational skills, traveling, booking your own travel and stuff like that. I mean, can be exhausting.
To do this well, you have to be good at so many things. It is impossible that there's not other things you couldn't like also do.
Of course.
If you wanted to. And so I really want to fight that narrative of like one person, one talent,
Yeah.
or one person, one calling.
Hell yeah.
And I know that for myself, for my own fulfillment, I want to write. I want to design things. There's lots of things I want to learn and try out before I die.
Yeah.
And singing is lovely and fulfilling. And when you have the work and you do the work, I really like it. And I love theater people.
Yeah. Me too.
But I also want to do other things. And it's a shame that sometimes I feel the pressure and other singers feel the pressure to never report on other outside things because they'll think, well, if you have any other priority, your heart's not really in it.
Right.
Or you're subpar, or you've got one foot out the door. And no, it doesn't have to be that way.
Hell yeah. Whenever I'm doing an interview and, the topic of, the days when I played competitive ice hockey and, the days now where I'm just sort of playing like a hobby team ice hockey, I have to really go all in explaining to people that, this is what balances my life, and even beyond that, just like you, I've got a lot of other interests, a lot of other things that I'd like to accomplish as well. A lot of it is, it all has to take a back seat to the career because the career just encapsulates so much time and so much energy. I heard it described one time as your child, where you almost have to give it that much attention and care. And, I can totally see that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a similar narrative that I kind of want to battle with. And I was told this many times as a young singer. And I know that there's some people who still say it now. And sometimes a very accomplished singer or musician in our world will come and speak to a group of students. And they'll say, look, if you can do anything else, do it. And I disagree with this. I understand where they're coming from, but sometimes this comes across as the accomplished singer saying, oh, my life has been so hard. There's so much suffering. And the thing is I think this can be gatekeeping in an unproductive way because for some young singers, they'll be like, yeah, but I do also like ice hockey. I do also like this other thing. Maybe this means I'm not meant to sing. And I think that's not the right way to look at it. I think, again, to have a broader mind and a broader life experience that is not merely one thing, that go ahead and learn and try other things that you love also. There is enough time in the day. There is, if you have a child, there's not enough time in the day. But there is enough time in a day and a week and a year to not only practice the one, craft of classical music or whatever, and you could do something else. And that doesn't mean that you're not dedicated enough.
Right. In
my opinion. And there are some singers, particularly some of these high demand, low supply singers, that they needed to get to their late 30s before they really came into their own. Some of these dramatics, it takes them a while. And what are they supposed to do from the age of 22 to 36?
Right.
Are they supposed to kind of struggle and have a bunch of administrators pat them on the head and say, well, your day's coming someday soon, be patient? And I'm not telling them to go into a different career path, but if you're focused on only this one thing in your life and it defines you and your ego is attached to it and it's not happening for you,
right,
it's so destructive.
Yeah. It can be very discouraging.
Yeah, yeah.
I I was talking in the last podcast with Clay about this business idea that I had. I know you're not supposed to like sort of broadcast business ideas that you have, but I just want this to happen so bad because I know of so many young singers out there that get discouraged or, in one way or another run out of money.
Yes.
Whether it's money that they have or money that they're willing to spend or money that they're willing to borrow because it's so hard to pay back these days. And that was this idea of having a business that sponsors, singers that have a lot of potential, or at least people think, you find someone who can really spot talent and basically giving them a salary.
Yeah, like a basic guaranteed income for singers.
Exactly. And then the business side of it comes then when they start becoming a professional and they, quote unquote, hit it big, hopefully, for the rest of their career, which if it's a dramatic singer, something that it maybe could be 15 years, it maybe could be 20 years or something like that. But they're making, hopefully a good amount, but the business gets a percentage of that contract.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what the numbers would turn out to be. Agents are getting between 10 and 15%, most of the time 10% of every job that you do. Maybe it's another 10% that goes back to the business. So, if you're singing in, that's why you have to be able to really spot the potential, because if it's a singer that's going to end up singing in small houses for the rest of their life, well, that's not so good. But if they're singing in big houses, for a 15 or 20 year span, you're talking about a really good chunk of change, and that's only one singer that comes back. If you get a roster of singers that are maybe, as the company grows, if you get a roster of singers of 75 to 100 singers, well, then you've got a good business going, and you've got enough coming on the back end to support more young singers coming up.
Yes. There's a program, and I do not know if it has been passed into law yet, but Ireland is discussing doing a basic guaranteed income for artists.
Ireland, the country of Ireland.
The country of Ireland.
Wow.
And I think, the population is small enough that the number of artists who would qualify, the budget would be in the millions, not the billions, in order to give X amount of money to each artist per month.
Right. For a country, that's nothing. For a person, a person, millions is a lot. But for a country, millions is nothing.
But off the top of my head, the total annual budget was it wasn't that bad from an American perspective, but that's not reasonable. But I think it was in the single or double digit millions, which, the ROI for that, in my opinion, is really, really good. The return on investment you're going to get on that by just allowing, if you were to take 1,000 creative artists and just give them the basics that they need to get by in life so that they don't have this stress of whether rent is going to get paid or food is on the table, and they can focus on what they want to do, then the artistic output of that country you are really caretaking it, and there can be immense return on investment for that in the creative output of that country, creating shows, drawing tourism. And I know that, and I don't just mean this in a material and financial sense. There's also, of course, the artistic rewards and reaping cultural rewards, but also financial rewards for the country as well.
Right. Well, I mean, they'll pay taxes.
Yeah. And, when discussing, and I'm not well read on this, but I am interested in the idea of basic guaranteed income.
Okay.
Anyway, and presidential candidate Andrew Yang in America became the most recent sort of most vocal champion of that. And I think it's a very fascinating discussion.
Let's get into it.
And I'm not entirely for. I mean, it could be a disaster. It might not work financially, but the idea of wondering, what if an entire population or a significant portion of the population had their basic needs met, what happens next? And in our crowd of people, for you and me, you and I know a lot of people who are totally willing to get by on peanuts so long as they get to do the thing they want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know that I got by on poverty wages in New York City for 10 years. And I was totally willing to do that for that hope that I can keep doing the thing that I want to do. And I know a lot of other people like that.
Yeah, it was peaks and valleys for me. I had it in times when I was making good money with some regional contracts, and then there was like 3 months with nothing, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you knew, it's like, you know what, rent's always going to get paid. Mm-hmm. I may not get to eat out every meal, but I'm going to eat, rent is going to get paid. And then you relax a bit.
Yeah.
You know, your shoulders, you know, come down a bit, and you're not like tense wondering about that. There's some fascinating research about how people's IQ can measurably decrease when the stress of poverty is hanging over their heads.
I heard about this study.
And that there can be this cyclical thing of when, and I'm sure I should journal about this and think about this, but I wouldn't be surprised at all of like when I was like poor and in debt and, you know, by New York terms, under the poverty line. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised if my decision making financially was poorer than it is now when I have more financial security.
Interesting.
Which is ironic, but that sounds like a very human thing. Mm-hmm. And what if, hypothetically, people knew that, you know what, rent's going to get paid, I'm going to eat, my children are going to eat. Mm-hmm. Now what do I want to do?
Right.
And that's a fascinating discussion to me. And anyway, this is to say, I really like the idea for your company, which is that I
like it too.
I think the investment of just allowing a group of people to get by could reap really big return on investment. Mm-hmm. And in yours, it's a very little return on investment because the people who are doing well and who make it pay back into the system in order to create more prosperity for the future.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I really do.
I think you need like 3 entities. You need one financial entity, you know, a treasurer and a board and its donors, which in the opera world, it's pretty easy to find. They're tattooed on the walls at the Metropolitan Opera.
Right.
They're engraved. They're in every American opera program.
Yeah.
You know, you get a program. All the donors are on the last page, and there's sometimes hundreds of them.
Right.
You know, you just hit all these people up saying, you know, instead of donating, would you like to own this percentage of this company?
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you'll get maybe not your full return, but you'll get partial return. And eventually, as the company grows, you'll get more and more of a return.
So it's a mix of a charitable motivation with a possible, you know, but it's not merely just giving money for a tax break in a charitable cause, but they could get return on investment.
Well, that's
possibly.
that's the other side that I would have to explore from a business perspective. You know, is it a really for-profit or is it a nonprofit company? Because if it's a nonprofit company, then you can have, you know, extremely rich people donate or give gifts for certain kinds of tax breaks.
Yeah.
And then but if it's a, you know, for profit, then, you know,
then
they're able to support the arts, which is what a lot of people do. A lot of people want to do. They have an honest desire to support the arts, and they get a little bit of a return. So they look like a savvy business person as well, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the financial wing, the talent wing. So, you know, a group, probably like a small group of talent agents that have to go around and find these young singers in universities, in places like Juilliard Opera Center, you know, but really you're talking about the entire world. And then another department for law, because you're going to be dealing with hundreds and hundreds of contracts, individual contracts with these singers, and you have to have somebody sort of policing them. To making sure that, you know, if they do a job in Sydney, that we're getting the percentage of that contract. If we do a job, if they then, you know, the next month do a job in New York, that the company gets the percentage from that contract. Yeah. Because you know, the singers can hack that as well. They can start doing jobs
Well,
and
it's kind
paying
of
you.
like operating as an agency supporter hybrid.
Right.
Because, an agent would keep track of that and would actually be negotiating contracts.
Right.
And in the old days, some managers managed the career. They said, look, here's the next step for you. I think a lot of agents, I think in modern times, it's more like we're just going to look for the jobs. But, a manager would actually advise and have a relationship with a singer. And I don't know, it almost sounds like there could be like this hybrid system where it's like, instead of living only off a cut of the jobs found, you actually provided a basic income for the singer in order to support them as best as possible. And then there could be a return on that investment later on.
Right. Yeah, it would always be later on. I mean, you'd have to kind of structure it. Would all the contracts would have to be like on an individual level, of course, because if you find a lyric coloratura soprano at the age of 19 or 20 and you think she's got the goods, like you got to jump on that.
Yeah.
Not literally, of course. But if you find a Clay Hilly at 20, 26 or 27 or 28 years old, and this guy is going to be singing all over the world, singing Tristan and singing Siegfried when he's 40.
Yeah.
And you got to sort of factor that in. We got to keep this guy going. We got to get him the teachers that he needs. We got to put him in a city and support him where we know he's going to have the opportunities to audition and make the very important contacts that he needs to make.
Yeah.
I thought another idea would be to bring in agencies. Now, of course, it's mutually beneficial for the agent as well. If we find the singer and bring them to them. So, for example, Alan Green at Cami, he's arguably in America the biggest agent in America.
Yeah.
If we form some kind of symbiotic relationship where we say, okay, Alan, because he's scouting singers too. He finds a singer at the Lindemann program and he says, this guy, he comes from a poor family, but he's got the goods. He's an amazing tenor. He's going to be a Cavaradossi. He's going to be, one of the best Don Josés of our generation, but he needs 5 years to mature.
Yeah.
And the Met has already made him some promises, but it's 5 years down the line, 6 years down the line.
Yeah.
How can we keep him in New York, working with his teacher that he loves in New York, and keeping him in the atmosphere of New York
Yes.
for 5 years?
Yeah.
While he sort of cools his jets. A lot of singers would have to take a second job, or they could go in this direction too. Okay, if the big companies won't hire me, I'm going to go to these small companies and go sing a little bit. And that can sometimes be damaging for a singer who's really got world-class potential as well. Mm-hmm. Because they go to these small companies, maybe they work with subpar directors and conductors who somehow damage them. They get negative reviews, and that attacks their psyche, and in 5 years, instead of having the potential to really shoot to the A-list of the opera world, they're subpar.
I would see the danger is taking any and all opportunities that come your way to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Right. So you take roles that may or may not work for you, but it'll pay. Or you take roles that are mostly appropriate, but you just take too much of them and you get tired, or you tire yourself out or injure yourself or whatever. And I would see that as being a danger when, the worrying about the finances and paying bills is a motivating factor instead of just love, passion, joy,
right,
etc.
Exactly.
And I think it would be great to have a wider, broader, smaller distribution of the massive amount of funds, at least in America. There's a lot of private money in America that goes into the classical arts. That's how classical art thrives in America.
It's pretty much
is through foundations.
all of it.
And private money.
Right.
And the boards of various foundations. And I've thought for a long time now that there are a lot of competitions that have some really big financial, like first, second, third prizes, like even in the tens of thousands of dollars in some cases. And I would much prefer to give like 20 singers, $3,000 than to give 2 singers $30,000. And I would find it very beneficial to have a program that instead of giving 100 or 200K to somebody and instead say, look, here's a whole group of singers. It's 20, it's 30, it's 50 or whatever. And we're going to give them each $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month or something. And nothing glorious, but enough to that's not going to pay New York rent, but
yeah, if you have a roommate.
But, depending on your situation and where your cost of living and where you're at, something where most of your needs are already taken care of.
Yeah.
And of course, this would mean the most to the singers who have the financial need. There's a lot of singers out there who have an advantage just because the family can take care of basics through the awkward years.
Yeah.
Before the career takes off.
Yeah, I was fortunate my family did that for me. So
right. And so this would be the family for those singers that don't have that kind of resource
right
available,
of which there are many,
where we can take the stress away from the worrying about the basics of rent, food, etc., maybe some lesson in coaching expenses, and just focus on being and growing. And you could even look at it, I mean, I wouldn't want to look at it this way, but let's say the way that labels would approach artists, which was extremely exploitative, and also the way that, my dad was an engineer in oil for a long, long time, and he would tell me that, the company would spot 5 locations that were probable where they could strike, where they could get oil, and one of them would work out.
Okay.
But the one that works out really works out.
Right.
And it pays for all the other projects.
Okay.
So the other 4 are just sunk cost. You just paid a ton of money for whole teams of people to drill somewhere like in the middle of the ocean or on the ground or whatever, and you just didn't get anywhere. But that one project that worked out was very and a lot of labels would follow this, where they would put in X amount of money into artists, and they only need one of them or 2.
You're talking about recording labels?
Recording labels.
Okay,
Excuse
got
me.
it. No.
That's what I meant by label.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying I want to emulate that, but I think what I want to say is, if you spread out the money far enough, you're not looking to try and create the next Mozart out of every single person. You're watering a lot of seeds, and if only X number are launched into the kind of careers that they love, that's still a huge return on investment. And even if you've just alleviated the poverty of a group of people in order to pursue what they want, that's still a huge return on investment.
Yeah. You talking about classical music labels or the recording industry
I
in
meant
general?
pop rock. I meant pop rock record labels. So
absolutely. It's all about the bottom line for them, That's why. Yeah, you can check out documentaries about these boy bands from the 90s and stuff like that. Completely
so when
exploited.
when I talked about the exploitative labels, what I meant is in the pop rock world. And now that's still changed, and they're still trying to find out how they operate in the post Spotify world. Not post Spotify, in the Spotify streaming world.
Streaming world, yeah.
But it used to be, and I'm not very knowledgeable about this, but as I recall, Courtney Love did a really detailed breakdown on how this works. But they'll say they'll pay, X amount on marketing and X amount to get this album out and whatever. And the exploitative side was something where they could always fudge the numbers and be very opaque about what was actually spent and say, okay, everything you make from this point on is owed to us. Oh. So they may have only spent, and they may have spent a lot of money. They might have spent $250,000 or $500,000 or something, but the artist is pulling in the millions, but they get to be opaque about the numbers and say, well, it's still owed to us. Or even if it's more than what we paid, this is what's in the contract. So, so there's that infamous moment when Prince did an entire concert with the word slave written across his forehead. Amazing. So he fought really hard over that. So when I talk about this method of spreading the wealth around, I don't mean to do it in an exploitative way that pop rock labels used to do, but that if you spread the money around enough and you water enough seeds, you could really create a lot of great art.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt.
And it doesn't just have to be a sort of competition where you find the one singer who wins first place and give that person, tens of thousands of dollars. I think it would be better. I think it would be more rational to find a larger group of very good singers. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to predict, especially when singers are like 22 and they're college age. Mm. It's really hard to predict what they're going to go through in life, to what voice type they'll be, if they even like the work, if they like the business side of opera. Do they like the travel?
Right.
Do they like working with these directors and maestros or their fellow singers? It's very hard to predict, when they're 21, you could say wicked amazing talent and voice like that. You could say that's a 1 in 1,000 talent for sure. But will they want to be in the business once they've gotten a taste of it? You and I know some people who absolutely could have, made or have been in the business if they wanted to, but they didn't want to.
Right.
Because there's some elements of this that are, that not everybody likes.
Yeah.
I like the travel.
Yeah,
and I
too.
like the people, but not everybody does.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, you got to have a really thick skin too, because you got these reviewers who oftentimes don't know about the voice, don't know about opera, have never been in an opera production in their entire life, and they can tear you apart. And I've seen a lot of singers go down in that way as well.
Yeah.
They get a couple bad reviews and they're psychologically so shaken.
Yes.
They can't recover.
I think it's really hard in our career, and whatever, I'll say it. There are a lot of people who are in the place of power of casting and saying, here's the person who gets the job, here's the person who doesn't. And a great number of these people know far less about singing than you or I do.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who never went to music school or who never took voice lessons, and they're deciding whose dreams live or die. And that can be really disheartening for us. In the world of ballet, if there was somebody who had never danced and never trained, and that person was put in charge of hiring all the dancers and casting them, that would be a joke.
That would be a global uproar. That would be for sure.
It would be laughable. Like you and I are smiling and almost laughing right now at this idea that in this incredibly regimented and extreme, I'm not sure if anybody in classical art has it harder than ballet dancers.
Yeah.
The careers are so short, it's brutal.
Short.
Injuries are frequent, body image issues, all this stuff. Anyway, but the idea that a non-dancer would become a casting person and decide who's good and who's bad and who gets in and who doesn't is a joke. It is utterly commonplace in our world. Now, that being said, there are some people who have never sung and never studied, and they love the art form, and they do have the ear.
Right.
They really do, and they really are good at their job. But I would say one of the most important positions in our entire opera world is the casting director.
Yes.
And putting the right people in the right positions. And it takes an immense amount of knowledge of the repertoire and a really fantastic ear.
Yeah.
And knowledge about what's good technique and what isn't. And from the 9 minutes that you just heard from the singer, can you project how they're going to make it through a whole evening?
Yeah, often less.
And how did I get on this segue? But that is, we're talking about the frustrations that singers face from critics, who are certainly less knowledgeable than we are.
Yeah.
And yet they are permitted, they have a platform from which to judge us.
Yeah.
And I am very concerned with if I were to speak to a group of young singers and be like, well, what advice would you have for us? And I would say, like, my advice wouldn't be much about how to succeed, because my life followed a line of like a whole kind of lost decade of that's not fair. I've lived a good life, but I did have a decade of my life where I was absolutely determined to be this one thing, and I wasn't really succeeding at it. And I was sad more often than I was happy. And so I'm very concerned for singers. How do you do this and maintain some level of contentment and happiness? Because also those who are working consistently and are having their basic needs met are still facing these challenges to their ego and rejections.
Yep.
And this is something I've put. We all have. It's of great concern to me. And if there's anything I would impart to young singers that I was teaching, other than vocal technique, it would be what's the toolbox of emotional resilience that I could pass on to you.
Yeah, that's a really, really tough thing, taking the criticism and stuff like that. I had an idea. It's sort of too late to sort of do this. I don't know, maybe it's not. But to sort of incorporate yourself. And so...
I know a singer who did that.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of singers who have done it. I know a few. But you incorporate yourself. First of all, it sort of sets you apart from your career in a financial way, but you can also use it as sort of a psychological shield as well. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't get a bad review. My business got a bad review.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can kind of like, okay, well, let's look at this from a perspective of I am an employee at this business, or I work at this business, Okay, so I've just got to take this from a completely objective standpoint, okay, I need to work on this and this and this. And okay, let's be, really objective about this kind of criticism,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
One of referring back to an earlier topic about having multiple hobbies or multiple creative outlets or multiple pursuits in your life. I had a dear friend who used to say, creative work of any kind is an energy source. You should have multiple energy sources.
Well said.
And she studied dance. She studied anthropology. She was a poet. She had all these different things that she was so talented at. And she would say, this is a source of energy. It's not something that you put into. It fuels you. And you need multiple of them, because when one of them sucks and one of them goes down, or you get that bad review, or you get the rejections or whatever, it is not the totality of your identity that has been attacked. This can be the weakness, another weakness of attaching your ego to this single statement, I am a singer.
Right. I am my voice.
I am a singer.
That too,
yeah, if I'm my voice and my voice sucks today, then I am a bad person.
Yeah.
Or if I get this rejection, I am rejected as a person.
It's so easy to fall into that, like, what is my persona? My persona is I am a singer. Okay, if I can't sing anymore, what am I?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very hard. You really have to sort of organize your life into saying, like, singing is my job. I love singing. I am a singer, but I am also these other things.
Yeah. Right.
know?
You're a father, you're a friend, you have these other things. I just faced a big test on this week because I had a special opportunity thrown to me where a big house needed somebody to jump into a small supporting role, and I'd already done it before. And my agent called me and was like, "Can you go into rehearsal tomorrow and do this?" And I'm like, "This one? Yeah, that's not such a big role. I can do that." So that was last Sunday. I crammed the role into my head. I show up to rehearsal. Things are good. And I'm excited because I'm not yet like this big house singer who does a lot of A-house work all the time. Now, this role is not entirely appropriate for me. It was a bit high for me, but I figured it's a small role and I'm not going to make a terrible impression when I do it. But in the rehearsal process, the management decided to remove me from the production because I wasn't an appropriate match for the rest of the cast. And so right now, I am like investing in ego self-defense.
Yeah.
And I'm calling my best friends and saying, because I haven't faced a rejection like this in a long time.
Right.
But here's what I am doing and have done to weather this rejection. I talk with the people who I love, with my girlfriend, with my best friends who are also, weathered, experienced singers who have all been through this. And I already went into it with realistic expectations, or rather low expectations.
Okay.
So if I were to write a self-help book, the title would be, "What Did You Expect?" It'll be just a book. I'm sure this book's already been done, but it's just low expectations. It'd be like, "He lied to me. What did you expect? War has broken out. What did you expect?" So I come into this kind of knowing how I fit in or how I don't fit in, or I don't expect that I'm going to go in and change the world. We all dream of this, though. We all want that Cinderella story where we sing in a storied institution or for a powerful person. They say, "You, wow, great job. What else could you do with us?" We all want that to happen. But I think what's helping me just now that I'm like dealing with this right now this week, is remembering which things are in my control, and those things that are beyond my control, I'm not going to expend a ton of negative energy on that. So the opinions of others, my Fach, my exact voice type, and whether I fit into a certain cast that has already been created, that is not in my control. That's up to the casting directors. If they made a mistake, that's on them.
Right.
And I'm not. That's up to them to find the appropriate person. If they change their mind about me, I didn't do a bad job. I believe that. I guess that's another thing that is contributing to my, spiritual survival in this, is I believe I did well, or I did the best I can, and everybody else can make of that what they will.
The best that you can also at this point in your career, because, let's remember also that you're a bass baritone, and your voice is going to continue to grow and get better. You're probably just coming into your prime right now.
Yeah. things have, even in my 40s, things are changing.
Yeah.
And now
Definitely.
the voice is getting kind of lower, and I'm still kind of finding where exactly is my niche.
Yeah.
And I am allowed. I allow myself to experiment. I allow myself to try and find things that fit. And others are allowed their opinions.
Yeah.
So long as I'm treated respectfully, then everybody is allowed their opinions, and they can love or hate what I do.
Yeah. And as individuals, not just in the world of opera, we only grow through our failures. If we were just given everything on a silver platter, we would be spineless wimps, in society. And I don't think that's helping anybody.
Yeah.
That's not helping anybody. Also, your psyche is formed by the way that you talk to yourself.
Yeah.
Your inner monologue, and we talk about that from an acting standpoint. Like when you're on stage, you're talking to yourself in the character of that, in the voice of that character. But we do this all day long. And so the way that you talk to yourself, especially after you've had some kind of rejection like that, that is a reaction. And the reactions in our life form our personalities.
Yeah.
We can choose to react a lot of different ways. If you're cut off, when you're on the highway, somebody cuts you off, or somebody disrespects you in a grocery store, they jump in front of you in line or something like that, or somebody bumps into you on the sidewalk and doesn't say, "Excuse me." Your reaction to that forms your personality.
Huh.
So your reaction to, what we would consider a catastrophic failure in some respects, you can, to be let go from a production, you can reform that if you want. Doesn't have to be a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
I was let go of 2 productions. One was after the General.
Oh man.
After
Come
the
on.
General, they just decided that I wasn't the right fit for the cast, and I guess they had found somebody else to replace me by that point.
With no rehearsal.
With no rehearsal, just seeing the video, or maybe even seeing the General. I don't know, live. I don't know what the goings on were there. And the other was after the first day, we did a sing through. And it was not even the general director; it was the maestro, and he just had an opinion about me. It was a role that I did very often, had success, and I really had to talk to myself in a very objective, gentle way. Okay, what am I going to do about this? In both cases,
that just breaks my heart to hear that.
Yeah.
I'd hate these stories.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take stuff like that lying down. So I actually sued both companies for my full fee.
Wow.
I sued for my full fee because I had a contract. They need to fulfill my contract. And I also started a Facebook page called Justice for Opera.
Huh.
And I've had a lot of people, because we as opera singers, we, like you mentioned earlier, we're so grateful for the work. Oh, thank you. Thank you for putting me in this role that's 30 seconds long.
Yeah.
We have to be grateful, of course, because this is high art, and we are very fortunate to be artists working in this genre, especially in this time where there are so many. The competition is very, very stiff. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, these companies have to honor the contracts that are doled out. And, in the second case that I was let go from a production, they did not grant me a live audition. They hired me based on my website and my resume, which is fine. And I actually have a lot of belief in that. But they didn't fire me because my voice didn't cut through the orchestra or something like that. We never got to that point.
Wow.
It was the maestro's subjective opinion, and I'll mention this too. I was the only American in an all French cast.
Okay.
And it was a French opera.
Okay.
And the conductor was French.
Okay.
I'll just mention that without any biases. And Trump was president at the time. So I'll just mention that without saying, and people will raise an eyebrow. But like I said, I mean, I needed to stand up to the company, first of all, and take some legal action. And I needed to feel like I could do something to help other singers who get in this position. And that's why I started this Facebook page. And there have been a lot of people who have posted on there who I've, written back to with some kind of legal advice.
Wow.
Because so often singers just kind of, okay, you don't like me. I'll walk away.
My first reaction to your story is like, you sued them, but what if they blacklist you? Right? That's the first reaction. It's like, how dare you fight back?
Yeah.
And I see how a lot of us have that really ingrained in us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a tenor, so I do have some privilege when it comes to casting. There are always fewer of me available, but at the same time, I said to myself, I don't care if I never sing with this opera company again. I don't care if I never sing in this country again. Mm-hmm. And with one of the legal actions that took place, there was a reporter in the courtroom, and he published an online article about it.
Yeah.
So people are going to go and check this article out, I'm sure. But, I met people who read the article later on, and they said, good for you.
Yeah.
We're so proud of you. They acted horribly to you. Yeah. So good for you for standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
So in the casting world, maybe that hurt me. I'll never know. But I know in my heart that I stood up for what I believed in artistically. Financially, I was compensated for myself and my family, who I was essentially the sole provider for my family at the time. And I'm okay with that, And I think that was my reaction. Yep. I could have, stayed in my room and, close all the drapes and drink myself silly for 2 weeks. I could have done that, or I could have done, things a lot worse, and people have done things a lot worse because of outcomes like that.
Yeah.
But I helped a girl with this Facebook page. I helped a girl who was fired from an opera job because she was a guest, and she let the administration know that she was pregnant. And I don't mean her.
I mean the administration.
The administration. Of course, that's a big no. You can't do that.
Yeah.
But she was, posting things on Facebook like, I'm really sad, and I just hope this, I hope this, cancellation that I had doesn't affect my career in the future, and I'm just gonna go home and be really sad about it, and hopefully I'll get out of this depression soon. And I was like, oh boy, and I wrote back to her and I said, you can't let this go. Not just for yourself, but for the next pregnant singer that shows up at a job. Okay, fine. If the director says to you, look, I had an idea that I think it's going to be physically dangerous for you and for your baby because of the regie, because of the directing ideas that I have for this production. I would like to release you from the contract, but let's make a deal financially.
Yes.
Let's get together with the opera house. Let's see if we can bring you back in 2 years, bring you back in 3 years for another role. That's a completely different animal.
Yes.
I'm talking about when an opera company just knocks on your door and says, "Come to my office. We're firing you." Oh, why? We just don't like you.
Yeah. Yeah, that is too lopsided a power equation. It's just...
So the result of this girl, she got her full fee.
All right.
And her career is still in an upwards movement.
Good for you. I'm really glad you did that, and I'm really glad she took your advice.
Yeah.
The situation that I'm just going through now, we are discussing, a partial payout.
Yeah.
And I did do work. I've been rehearsing all week. And maybe potentially, repertoire with the same house in the future. So if that works out that way, then so be it. That would probably be even better than fulfilling the first contract, which was just for one show.
Yeah. Yeah. You can take this experience and you can dig in your heels. Dig your heels in. Dig in your heels. Yeah. You can dig your heels in, and now you can take this experience and say, okay, maybe this role is sort of leaving my repertoire, but what can I add? What 3 roles can I add in place of this role? Maybe in the same opera, maybe in the same genre.
Yeah.
And maybe study those roles. Get them really ready, So maybe they'll give you a stage audition. You can present these roles in the audition or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can show them, okay, you didn't give me a chance 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, or 3 years ago, or something like that. But I'm going to show you that I didn't take that rejection lying down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Here's what I was going to say. When I get hit with emotionally challenging things in my work life, I always try to look at it, what's the thing I'll learn from this? So like this week is me learning to deal with an emotionally difficult rejection.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the inner game.
Good.
Learning to increase, and it's because of the work that I've done in the decades before now that this is, I don't want to jinx it. It's only been a day or two since it's happened, but I'm doing okay.
Good.
And
Good.
I was very sad and down in the afternoon afterwards, and
sure.
And now after talking to supportive people, I'm able to keep a sort of rational and objective view of this, and have a sense of self-worth that is granted to me by me, and not only from outsiders. And that I look at this as like, if it is hard, then I'm gonna learn how I deal with this emotional difficulty. What are the tools that I can use in my self-accepting, self-loving, rational approach to this.
And thank you so much, Andy, for sharing that. Yeah. Because I think that's going to hit home with a lot of singers.
Yeah.
A lot of people that have, we all have to face rejection. We all have to sort of get through it.
Yeah.
And especially, when you're doing an opera production, especially, your adrenaline is so high. And especially like you mentioned, this sort of Cinderella story. It's always like this Cinderella story, Rocky and stuff that.
What if?
We got our shot. I got my shot, with this company. This is my shot. And I blew it.
Yeah.
It can be devastating. And let's remember also that these emotions that we have are so often chemically based. The chemicals that are in our bodies, the reasons that we can be opera singers is that we have learned to access these emotions that are sometimes uncontrollable for most people, but for many, many people, these emotions are uncontrollable because of the chemical, their own body chemistry, So, you walk in that door of the opera house, and your adrenaline just spikes, you know? And when you, the dopamine hit is like unbelievable. I was reading an article the other day about dopamine, and, it was all about how we get these dopamine hits. The idea is that we get it while we're doing a certain act that we love. Mm-hmm. But what the research showed was that we get the dopamine before we do what we love. It's in the anticipation that we get the dopamine hit. Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting.
The article was mostly about video games. Kids playing video games.
Yes.
They would actually get the dopamine hit as they were like firing up the computer.
Yeah. Or maybe there's a particular sound or little anthem that plays.
Yeah, exactly.
And that sounds like,
yeah,
I'm going to do the thing.
And actually, what they measured was as they were playing the game, the dopamine mixture went down. Until, and you can think about that. Like I know I have done this. When I'm playing video games with my son, like I'm really excited to play with him. He's a lot of fun and he's laughing and stuff like that. But as the game goes on and he's kicking my ass, I get frustrated. Yeah. So of course there's no dopamine involved in that.
Yeah. I mean, game design and addiction is a very fascinating topic. And there are two games that are probably my two major addictions right now. And one's called Clash of Clans, which is a strategic game you play on, Clash Royale that you play on your phone.
Okay.
And Rocket League, which is essentially soccer with cars. You play football and you knock a soccer ball into the other guy's goal with your car.
Oh, okay.
And they're delightful. I love them. And you almost only ever play other human beings. You are not playing an AI or a computer.
Okay.
And in these, which is kind of like the online version of Call of Duty and such. You're only other playing human beings, which are always, at least so far, better than AI. They will always find weird, creative ways to beat you.
Yeah.
And so in these two games that I play a lot of, you play a 5-minute game. It's going to be over in 3 to 5 minutes, and you win or you lose, and you win and you win and you lose and you lose, and on and on. And there's like that, I got it. But the thing is, engaging game design, which can cross the line into addiction, is like working this line of challenging versus too challenging. And getting in just that level where like you're being just challenged enough that when you get it, you're like, oh, yes, but not too easy either.
Okay.
And so the game is trying to rank you so that you're playing other people of your rank. Mm-hmm. But inevitably, I'm going to have some days where I play these games and I just lose and lose and lose and lose, where you just get a string of opponents who all just beat you.
Wow.
And that is not, I'm pretty sure I'm not getting dopamine. But the thing is, it's still that loss, I'm still motivated to keep coming in for the next win. And somehow video games are good at engaging our resilience and engaging our stubbornness to come in and risk the next loss, where there are some other endeavors that we'll avoid it instead. We'll engage in procrastination or whatever and not try to do that. But games can be pretty good at hooking us into keep trying. And I think they're also good at in the example of the games I just made, you after enough losses, you rank down, you play people of your rank until you maybe get some more wins again.
Yeah. Amazing. I think it was Joe Rogan I was listening to the other day where he had, it was not the other day, it was like maybe 2 months ago, somebody on there talking about addiction, and that's a word that gets thrown around a lot these days.
Yeah.
Like with video games, like with screens, drugs, alcohol, that kind of thing. And like, what is addiction?
Yeah.
And I think they really characterized it as it's, having this sort of uncontrollable attraction to something. But addiction, the word itself, what they said, and somebody can write in and correct me if I'm wrong about this, what they said was that the word addiction has negative connotations.
Yes.
So in other words, if you love playing these video games, if you love having 2 or 3 glasses of scotch every night, if these things start to have some kind of negative impact on you, your family life, your financial stability, if it prevents you from going to work, if you have some kind of serious health problem develop from whatever it is you're sort of dying to do, that's addiction.
Yeah.
But the sense that you want to sit down and play video games for 3 hours every night or 3 hours every day, and to me that would seem like a long time, and I would get a little bored. But I'm not really a video game guy. But I do enjoy a glass or 2 of scotch, I would say almost every night. It sort of takes the edge off of my brain, which seems to be working at a high capacity all the time.
Yeah.
And just sort of calms me down. It just sort of softens everything, and I sleep like a baby. I never take melatonin or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I never wake up with a headache. I don't have any other kind of serious side effects. I don't drink really expensive scotch. Yeah. It's rather cheap, but it's nice.
Well, here's the question. If for some reason due to circumstance you were forced to go totally dry for like a month, would you suffer withdrawal?
I don't think so. Okay. I mean, there may be some aspects of my life that sort of, that alcohol masked. One thing I'm sure would be sleep. I think I would have a hard time sleeping. First of all, falling asleep, and second of all, I think I would wake up a lot. There's been a couple nights where I haven't had anything to drink, and I sort of just wake up, and I'm like, why am I awake? I'm awake. It's because my brain is just awake. My brain's awake, so I'm awake.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't end up being a problem later in my life, but as of right now, it's very manageable. It's been this way now for a few years.
I mean, that's how I measure my, quote, addictive behaviors is how am I going to feel if it was taken away from me?
Right.
And if, I have a dear friend who's dealt with addiction issues a lot and advised me and said, all right, social media and whatever, do not touch it for a month. And if you resist that, then you know. And then I'm like, okay. And she's like, if you really feel resistance to that, like you really don't want to quit, then you have to. And there was a month where I went without it, and it really did help me even out a bit. Because, okay. Yeah, just because, as we know,
there's anxiety. There's definitely anxiety connected to social media. I mean, I think that's been proven.
Yeah. Well, the algorithms, which may have begun innocently simply to operate and to just keep pushing to people what keeps them engaged. Engaged is a word that's used often in game design and in social media, user engagement.
Yes.
And so the algorithms are just doing the thing. They're just pushing, well, if you like this, you might also like this. And now we have this landscape with these crazy unintended consequences where it turns out that what keeps us engaged is high emotions, often negative emotions. Triggering. And that does keep us engaged, and we keep checking in. And so, whereas Facebook, in 2012 was kind of, kittens and photos of our kids.
Right. Gosh.
And now I have all manner of stuff pushed to me, and I have to kind of avoid it or try and click the little options that says see fewer of these.
Oh, right.
But it can be anxiety inducing, and certainly when an election is coming up.
There was a guy on Joe Rogan the other day who was talking about Google, and really he's under attack by these internet companies, especially Google, who because he's I guess he's like a computer scientist, but now all of his work is analytical. So he analyzes these algorithms, and he collects data, and he reads lots of articles and talks to lots of people. Some of them whistleblowers, who have left Google and Facebook and things like that. And I mean, he just had some really interesting stuff to say about the algorithms. And there's another word that's coming up. You mentioned engagement, and that's number one, I think. And now number two is slowly becoming influence.
Oh, gosh. Oh, you're scaring me. But yeah.
Because it's, this guy sort of revealed that the morals of these big tech giants are slowly being pushed on their users in one way or another. Whether it's ads, whether it's curating posts. He mentioned something about the 2016 election. Apparently, Facebook had an option right before the election to send out a notification from Facebook to all the Democratic users, and they know who the Democratic users are.
Yeah.
To all the Democratic users, just reminding them to vote. Mm-hmm. Not which way to vote, just reminding them to vote.
But it's who they targeted with the notification.
Right. Well, it's been analyzed that if Facebook would have done that, it would have accounted for 450,000 votes. And Trump won that election by what,
70,000 votes in 3 states.
Yeah, it was like 70,000 votes in 3 states.
Something like that.
So we're talking about 450,000 votes.
Yeah.
Now we don't know what the spread of that would have been.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of, it's a lot of projection, because you'd have to project how many of the people received the notification that didn't vote and would have voted anyway.
Right.
But that's a very interesting what if.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's praising a hypothetical, or he's whistleblowing something that happened.
He's whistleblowing something that happened. That was something that came out. I mean, I guess you can Google that. Well, maybe not Google. I switched my browser. I'm using something called Brave.com
Sure,
now.
I've heard of Brave.
Yeah. I'm using that, and it's great.
Okay.
It's great.
Yeah.
I actually had an experience with Google. I was looking for a piece of music, and I kept Google searching it, and I just couldn't find it. Google search again, Google search again, Google search again. And, different combinations of the words, sort of thing. And I was like, this is a piece of music that I know is in print, and I can't find a source that will sell it to me.
Yeah.
And I tried searching it. Then, I heard this podcast then, and I switched my browser to Brave, and I searched it on Brave, and I found it right away.
Oh, what on earth?
It was in a musical warehouse that didn't have an affiliation with Google.
Whoa.
And I never heard of this musical warehouse before. I mean, this name came up, and I don't want to get crazy with the names, so I'll just keep it anonymous. But this name came up, and I was like, this is a musical warehouse? How can I be a professional musician for almost 22 years and never have heard of this musical warehouse? And because it was curated. It was curated from me by Google.
Wow. Yeah.
And in this particular case, it kept me from finding a piece of music that I really needed to find.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's trivial when it comes to, when it comes to, the global perspective. But, imagine somebody's searching for something that's more important, some kind of medical device or something like that. Yeah. And Google curates the search results.
Yeah.
So they never find it.
A lot of people don't know that Google is an advertising company, and they print money. They have a gigantic amount of revenue, and they spend it on a lot of different things. So they think that Google, well, now it's Alphabet, I think, right? Is the
Alphabet
parent
is the
company.
parent company, right?
So they have a parent company that have tons of ventures, self-driving cars, and all these products. Google Maps and Mail and productivity and whatever, and a lot of R&D. But really, the far majority of their income is advertising.
Absolutely.
And they are so dominant in that sector that if you were not in AdSense, that's their product, where they connect eyeballs to products,
right?
And you pay them to do so,
right?
If you're not engaging with AdSense, you may not exist. Back in the day, when AOL was dominant, that's kind of what all these companies want to do. They want to become the internet. And that's what AOL was aiming to be. Like you didn't log into the internet, you logged into AOL.
That's right.
And they were everything. They were your email client, they were your chat client. They gave you this big opening page with all the news and the celebrity news and whatever.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah. Remember, this is like late 90s, 2000.
I still have my AOL.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so in the early days of the internet, they were aiming to be the internet. And in a way, some of these guys, and it's almost kind of an inevitability that, and I'm not, there's a really good book about this by, I think the last name is Kelly, and I think it's called The New Rules of the New Economy.
Okay.
But this is like around 2000 when he wrote it.
But
but essentially the way that economic incentives worked within an internet business is that everything wants to become a monopoly eventually. There weren't, do you remember Craigslist?
Yeah.
There's not 50 different versions of Craigslist.
That's right.
There's the Craigslist. It just became the one.
Right.
And there's not, and I remember when eBay came out, I don't know when that was, around 2000 or something, and there were a bunch of auction sites.
I think it was like 95.
Oh, wow. Okay.
96. Yeah, maybe you're right, around 2000. Yeah, I think you're right.
So in the late 90s, let's say, and I remember surfing the internet, and once eBay caught on, a bunch of copycats tried to catch on to that too. So when you tried to shop for items, eBay and all these other guys, now eBay won out, and that's just it. eBay is synonymous with all of online auctioning and some shopping. And so that's kind of the nature of it. And if you become the dominant search engine, there's not a ton of competitors. And that's true in other businesses, but extremely true in internet businesses. So Amazon is just kind of the shopping of everything.
Yeah.
And Google is just synonymous with search. If you want to find anyone or anything, it's got to be them. And they want it to be that way because then everybody in the world that wants to sell a thing has to pay them to be seen. Otherwise, they do not exist.
Right.
As apparently this music warehouse did.
Yeah, it goes back to the P word, profit. I mean, if investors see companies moving up, making lots of profits, they want to invest more. And so that's how they grow.
Yeah, I think there's what you mentioned some whistleblowers recently, and there was a really big one from Facebook about 2 months ago or something. And she not only testified, but also did a big document dump.
Yeah.
Thousands of pages of internal memos in Facebook. And so the trouble we're seeing is that when management is confronted with something that is materially negative, that there really are bad outcomes, and that we're seeing that this is happening to users, or the negative effects it happens upon users, and they said, look, here are material steps we can do to improve this. The thing is, they've been constantly presented with this choice of profit or benefiting the user. And so far, it seems they can't create a win-win where they keep ratcheting up engagement and keeping us happy. For whatever reason, the way our monkey brains work, negative emotional engagement is just gold. It's just a gold mine. And when presented with the choice of either making more money or making us happier, they're choosing the money. And we're going to have to see if more whistleblowing or holding their feet to the fire or something can change that.
Yeah, the guy on the Joe Rogan's podcast, he said, basically, you can get these big companies to back down if you do to them what they do to you.
As a group,
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, he's got this this company. It's not a company that like a for-profit company. It's more like an organization that basically just calls Google on all their shit. You know, it basically says, look, we caught you doing this. We caught you trying to influence this election. We caught you trying to influence this, whatever, general opinion about something, whether it be political or social or, you know, I mean, I don't know if you heard what's happening with Joe Rogan right now. You know, I mean, he's sort of under attack by this.
There's a Spotify thing going on where people are like, you know, trying to deplatform him or just leave the platform.
I mean, musicians are either threatening or saying that they're going to leave their, take their music off of Spotify. What I think is really funny, like it started with Neil Young. Neil Young doesn't own his musical catalog anymore, so I'm not sure that he can pull it off Spotify.
Oh,
even if he wants to.
Well, I think he made comments and Spotify just removed him anyway, and like made his wish true. Or something.
Really? Okay.
I don't know that for a fact.
Okay. I mean, look, Joe is their cash cow right now. I mean, they had such an influx of users when his podcast became exclusive on Spotify.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I don't know him well, and I don't listen to him, but I know that I saw some mind-blowing numbers on because, you know, a lot of people are really worried about, well, what about the influence of CNN, the influence of Fox News? But if you were to take the most popular programs that CNN and Fox News do, you know, you'd reach, you know, 3 million whatever viewers. And Joe Rogan, there was a bar chart of like the biggest numbers of followers of programs of these TV programs, and then Joe Rogan. Yeah. And he's tens of millions beyond second place.
It's amazing. And there's like two guys running that podcast. There's like Joe and his technical supervisor kind of thing. And it's crazy, you know. He does the scheduling of his guests by himself. You know, I mean, it's just,
so anyway,
nuts.
he's the giant of that space.
Yeah, and I was talking to I forget who I was talking. I think it was maybe my son the other day. We were talking about it. And I said, you know, he's on the top of the mountain. And when you can't go any higher, you only have to look down at the people who are trying to get to you. Because there's going to be lots.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I'm sure like these, you know, CNN and Fox News, MSNBC, these, you know, independent media is taking over. I listened to another podcast called Breaking Points, and it's a left-wing person and a right-wing person, but they're friends. And so imagine that. They talk about the news. And what's really funny is, to me, they seem to be agreeing more than they're disagreeing, you know?
And I think that's the reality of it. We're unaware of that because our algorithms aren't showing us that.
Right.
But the reality is not you and me personally, but those of us along the left and right spectrum in numerous countries agree on a lot of things. We want to lead happy lives with basic freedoms and our children to have a better life than we do. You know, there's tons of basic stuff. Yeah. But emotion-based media will get more engagement out of us if they can get us more angry and afraid all the time.
You mind hitting me with that grappa again?
Here we come.
Grappa. That's nice.
Oh, that's a good sound. Let's do that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good. That's my new intro.
That should be like your SMS notification or something.
Oh, yeah. Bonk.
You're like,
bonk.
Oh, I want to answer that.
Welcome.
Let's pour a little more.
Yeah, that's nice. Bonk. Welcome to the Cigawi podcast with Eric Fennell.
What's the name from?
Cigawi is an acronym. It stands for, can I get a word in?
Tell me.
Can I get a word in? Cigawi.
Oh. Cigawi.
Great.
Let's do that in movie voice. Cigawi. Wait, no, I have to do it with the pop.
Okay.
Cigawi.
I'll drink to that. Cheers,
Prost.
buddy. Bing. So, should we go back to a little singer talk?
Sure, yeah.
How you doing on time? You got to be somewhere today, or? I don't even know what time it is.
I just plan to go out with Amelie and spend some time with her and see Spider-Man.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Great. I think I saw it. Yeah, I saw it over the Christmas holiday.
It's good?
With my son. Yeah, it was great.
The reviews are good.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They tie a lot of stuff together.
Okay.
Is,
that's what they have to do now. Like they have this crazy sprawling cinematic universe now.
Yeah.
We've never had something like this before.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. They tie a lot of stuff together. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to give any spoilers.
Sure. I heard that on Disney Plus. I haven't seen this yet, but somebody that I follow on Twitter who isn't necessarily a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but said, you know what, you should watch the making of Endgame, which was the big tying together of 20 movies into a finale for that chapter, which was Avengers Endgame. And all the work the writers had to do to try and tie 180 threads together in a way that is workable and pleasing for the fans, etc. I'll be curious to see what went into that.
It's entertaining.
Sorry, singer stuff.
So back to a little singer talk. There's one topic I want to go in a deep dive with you, and that is your voice teacher at Oberlin.
Right.
He is, to call him a voice teacher guru is even an understatement as to what he is and what he did for the scientific side of singing.
Yeah.
You know, singing is one of these really difficult instruments because, like a violin, we can't, with a violin, we can look and see, your arm is a little, your arm is not in the right position when you're bowing, or your violin is cracked, or the string is broken, or something like that. With singing, it's much more psychological, and there's always been this approach throughout history, there's sort of two schools of teaching. Whether you're a technical teacher, that is, you say, okay, raise your soft palate, lower your larynx, all this. You're actually talking
Here
about
are specific actionable things to do.
Exactly, as opposed to the other teachers who are more like, just think about this as a lamb jumping over a fence.
Images and metaphors.
Right.
And
smell the rose. That's always I love that one.
Yeah.
Smell the rose. In this moment, really smell the rose. Mm-hmm. And so it's more imagery based, Yeah. And I often thought, I've got to be, one of these two schools. And, because, I'm an athlete and I understand muscularity and things like that, I should be more of the technical side. But even the technical side is imagery.
Often.
You can't,
because even if you said, flex the vocalis muscle and extend, these are invisible muscles.
Exactly.
And if you could watch them, it's because there's a camera pointed at them, and it's the fibroscope in your nose. Like, what's the use? Like, there's too much. There's also unconscious musculature, right? Like the diaphragm can both be controlled consciously, but it also keeps breathing when we're not thinking about it.
That's right.
We keep breathing on all night unconsciously. So there's conscious and unconscious musculature, and there's all kinds of alignments we can do by just say, hey, imitate a bird.
Right.
And there's 100 things that will line up muscularly in our throats to do that. It would be useless to try and say, line up the hypocrygoid, this way, in order to, it would, no.
Right, exactly.
And so you can get sometimes further faster by giving a metaphor or an image.
Right. So just a little background on Richard. He was studying singing. He was drafted in World War II.
Yes.
He spent some time in France, and when he was stationed in France, he actually found a voice teacher, worked with this voice teacher, came back to the States, continued training as, I believe he was a tenor.
Yes.
He had a career as a tenor.
Yeah.
And he was always fascinated with the scientific aspect of singing. So the acoustic properties, the physiology that went into it. And he's written a handful of books and
a lot,
hundreds of articles for different voice and opera magazines and singing magazines and things like that. And he became a teacher then at the Oberlin Conservatory.
Yes.
And has had lots and lots of successful singers. He also basically single-handedly set up the voice program there. I mean, sort of brought it to the juggernaut status.
I think, he was the big name at the school during his time
he created this association with the Cleveland Scientific Clinic.
Yeah.
Where he...
The Cleveland Institute.
Cleveland Institute? No, it's Cleveland...
I'm thinking Cleveland Institute of Music, which is a school there. But there was... I worked with the doctors there as well.
Okay, yeah. It's like the Cleveland Scientific Clinic. Yeah. What did I say?
Cleveland Clinic?
Yeah, Cleveland Clinic, something like that.
Whatever.
Where they have this... I guess it's a series of scientific procedures and a machine probably that measures... decibel levels and clarity and volume of opera singers.
Well, Mr. Miller, in my first year, I entered Oberlin in 1992.
Oh, and can I say one more thing before you start this? On his Wikipedia page, which is fantastically written, by the way, they mention a number of successful singers that he had, of which they mention you.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a little boost for your ego.
Oh man, that's a...
And if you, it's a linked, your name is linked, and if you click on the link, it goes to your website.
Okay.
And
I am so legit.
Do you know who's famously left off that list?
Oh.
David Miller.
What?
The horror. David Miller is a member of Il Divo.
That's not
Shout
cool.
out to David Miller.
He should
Sorry,
be on
buddy.
there.
He should be on there. And also, I agree. He's a wonderful singer and a great guy.
I hope they link some of these other singers who went into Broadway. Because like Judy Kuhn, who did...
Oh, I don't think so.
The voice of the Little Mermaid.
Okay.
And I think the guy who did Gaston on the first Beauty and the Beast movie. I think these are also former Miller voice students.
I don't believe they're on there.
Or my colleague Marnie Robb, who I went to school with, was Christine in Phantom on Broadway for years.
Wow. I don't think so.
And, well, they should be.
Yeah, I think it's only opera
opinion.
Singers, unfortunately.
Because they went to the top of their respective worlds as well.
Sure.
But you mentioned the lab in Cleveland. And what I wanted to say was Mr. Miller built a vocal acoustics laboratory at Oberlin. And it had just sort of, begun when I arrived. And... neither he nor I would be so interested in it, but I really was. So I became kind of the student head of that laboratory.
Oh, great.
While I was there.
I was not aware of that.
So it was funded by Otto B. Schöpfli. So Otto B. Schöpfli Vocal Arts Studio. So it was a Vocal Arts Center. It was OBSVAC. Oh, whatever. So that lab had numerous instruments. Probably the one we used the most was the real-time spectrogram, but we could measure total decibel output. There was a nasometer for measuring nasality. After I left, I think they even got a scope. The scopes that an ear, nose, throat doctor will use to put down your throat and look.
Up the nose, down the throat.
I think they actually got their own.
Wow.
And so. I worked with Mr. Miller a great deal. I was at Oberlin for 5 years and got a bachelor's and master's there. I was also his personal assistant in many of his master classes. He had a 1 week sort of thing that he would do, and he'd travel all over the place. He'd go to Nashville and Australia and wherever and do a 1 week intensive where people would listen to lectures all day, and then, in the afternoons or evenings, some people would get up and sing for him and do a one-on-one masterclass situation. And I must have assisted in him, and I don't know how many times,
Amazing.
And I weeded in his gardens in the summer, and
Great.
and I also worked with him, 5 to 10 hours a week in the lab. So there may be somebody who's worked with him more than me, but probably not.
Okay.
As far as students
That's
are
amazing.
concerned.
I had no idea that you were that intimate with him.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, so his crusade was we use the word science, but I think he was trying to bring objective language into the teaching of singing, and more objective and rational methodology into looking at that. And so, he would say terms like, instead of talking about ring or ping or squealo or metal to describe the piercing, projecting quality of the voice when you're singing, he would say third formant, because that was a scientific term.
Yes.
And ring, ping, metal, squealo, aka third formant, is acoustic energy between 2,800 hertz and 4,000 hertz.
Wow.
And that it is that.
Yeah.
It's that quality in the voice that allows us to really project into a hall over an orchestra.
Right.
That's one example.
What would he say about someone who he thought didn't have that? Was it an issue of...
Well, how would he correct it, or how would he describe it?
Yeah, if he said, if a singer was presented to him and maybe he wasn't working with that singer, but he would talk to you about it, or he was asked a question about a certain singer, and he would have to say, well, this singer isn't doing XYZ, or is doing too much of XYZ, or...
Yeah. Well, something I would say about Mr. Miller is that even if he never gained notoriety because of his push into this area of objectivity and language, and if he was just a singer, if he was just a teacher who didn't have all this notoriety for his books, he still would have been a damn good teacher, because he just had a great ear, and he himself was a good singer. Even into his 70s, he was still quite a good tenor.
Wow.
And so, like many teachers, he would still model. And and you'd say, Andrew, you're doing this woofy bass thing, and you want to be a woofy bass, and you go, it is and hard. Can we just sing indies? Could you project more? I hope that wasn't too loud.
No. It's
and
fine.
And so, like many teachers, he might just use modeling.
Okay.
And say, it sounds like this. Could we try something more like this? He would like to use the term resonance balance. So we often talk about chiaroscuro, which in
Light and
Italian
dark.
means light and dark, and that we hope to have both of these qualities in our singing, that we have both of this round, velvet darkness in our voice, and the ring, the ping, the metal, the squealo in the sound, and that we have both of these, and that ideally we balance them, that it is neither too dark nor too bright, but both. And so he might talk about that, and then he'd have methodology, and that's his smash hit book was The Structure of Singing,
Right.
which a lot of kids refer to as, jokingly, the Burgundy Bible. And I think it was G. Schirmer's top seller for a long, long time.
Wow.
Because universities would order it in bulk.
Sure.
And also something I want to say, that book is dry, because his writing style for this book and some others is like brevity, like maximum information per sentence.
Wow.
But he personally is not like that.
Okay.
Was not like that. He was a really just funny, personable guy.
Yeah.
And he was a joker. He was intelligent, and he would find ways to relate things to you that weren't simply XYZ 1, 2, 3. I just want to say to people who only know Richard Miller through the book, that's not him exactly. That is him, of course. He did write it. And he credits his wife, Mary, a great deal as his editor. And he influenced me actually a lot in the way I write, because he would take something and he would shorten it and shorten it and shorten it and shorten it until he got only those things you need to know in the fewest sentence possible. But that means that this big book has a ton of dense information. You read a couple of paragraphs, you need to sit down and think.
Right.
But he would just say, here are ways to use the nasal continuance to have a favorable effect on this. So you might use the hum and have them go and in order to get the tongue in a favorable position to get more third formant in the sound. And the reason you get more third form in the sound is because the tongue raises and you get more of the pharyngeal resonator, and the larger the pharyngeal resonator is, the more resonance you get in this area of kilohertz, et cetera, et cetera. But you could also simply say, look, hum before you open to the ah, and you'll get more ring in the sound. And he wouldn't mind saying that either. But he would kind of insist that we knew why.
Okay, interesting.
And so he was not entirely anti-imagery, and he would use some tricks and images, or have me hook my thumb in front of my front teeth, or
manual manipulation.
But that was rare. He was more in favor of using as much objective language as he could, and not tell the singer, it's gonna feel this way, make it feel this way. And now that I'm teaching a decent amount, I don't go 100% in that direction. You know, I definitely use a lot of metaphor. In fact, I kind of do metaphor fishing, where I'll fish around a lot for a feeling or an idea or a metaphor or a movement. And sometimes you'll get one that'll hit the student just right, because it just meets them where they are. And because a picture is 1,000 words. And then I want to take responsibility for them knowing how and why. And a lot of people would ask or argue, if we get to the same spot faster through imagery, why not do that? And I think one of his answers would be, there's just so much charlatanism in voice teaching.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
There's, it's because it's so indefinable and unknowable, and instead of talking about physical movements that we can't see inside our throat, we talk about sound, but sound is unseeable. So there's tons of subjective language, and also in this, the emotional relationship between the teacher and the singer. If you didn't really know what you're doing as a teacher, and you're really not bringing the student forward, you could still just keep blaming the student.
He or she is just not getting it.
You say, you know what? You just need more support. You could just kind of say a platitude, and it's too easy to just blame the student for not getting it if there's no objective measure of whether you even know what you're talking about, how do you sniff out who's good versus who's bad?
Right. It seems like this is a big point in teaching of anything. It's coming more and more apparent as we're sort of realizing that, our young kids are not one size fits all when it comes to, elementary school classrooms and middle school classrooms and things like that. The teacher has to be more and more creative. And that especially goes, as well when you're teaching a singer, because you just have so many different kinds of personalities, so many different psychologies when it comes to singers. And, this instrument that's inside us, that's connected to our brains, that's connected to our emotions, that's connected to our chemical system. And it's not easy.
I think it is inevitable when you're a voice teacher that there's psychology. That even if you did your absolute best to completely avoid discussing emotion and motivation and ego, it's the elephant in the room. It's there, and as a teacher, I choose to consciously talk about, what motivates you. I think self-love and self-hatred are audible qualities.
Wow.
I think
Great.
Your self-acceptance is something that people hear. The magic of singing, the magic of acting as well. The magic of a great actor on a big film screen who induces an internal state, and they just are that person. They are that character going through that theme, through that experience, and you are the audience member observing that, and you go through it with them. We sympathize with the protagonist. Singing voices do this, where they induce the singer's state in the listener. And, somebody who has just found this balanced thing where it is both like athletic and wondrous and yet free and kind of easy at the same time, they make the listener feel like they could do it.
Yeah.
Or they make the listener, or like when we watch
Or it sounds easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you watch a gymnast do the quadruple flip and it's easy to them and you feel wonder.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
what would it feel like to do that? And I think that ego and self-love and self-hate and acceptance, that's all tied up into the various tensions or lack of tension that we have. And so for me and any teacher I work with, or for the students who I work with, there's going to be that's going to be a priority of mine, including on the work that I do with myself. I don't want to ignore that.
What kind of legacy now does Mr. Miller have? What's going on at Oberlin now? And
to my knowledge, I think Lorraine Mance is now heading up the studio at Oberlin. Is a lovely teacher and a lovely human being. I think there is a particular American style to teaching now in the international schools of singing. And a lot of people don't know that Mr. Miller's first book, and I'm going to get the title wrong, was International Vocal Pedagogies in Italy, France, Germany, and maybe UK.
Yeah, or Sweden or something.
But that was his first book in the 70s.
Interesting.
And he sat in on hundreds, perhaps thousands of voice lessons in each country. And said, the German school is guided by this aesthetic and they use these techniques. The Italian at school, blah, 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 blah. Anyway,
Amazing.
I think he's had a huge influence on the American school overall, if we could say there is one.
I'd say so, yeah.
I think, in my opinion, there is still to this day, the Germans and the French and the Italians, still have their kind of national sort of ideals of sound, and that guides their pedagogy. And the Americans are so young, the nation is so young, and we're removed from the birthplace of the art form.
Right.
And we're pragmatics. We're like, we'll take whatever works.
Right.
Which for most of us is kind of like, if I dare say the term bel canto, like that means 1,000 things. Now, every jerk in the world wants to think that they're like a bel canto teacher.
Right.
But I would say the Americans are very pragmatic. And so he's had this influence of, I would say you kind of at least have to pretend to know what you're talking about. Or really know, the how and the why. Even if you're image based, and I think a lot. I've run into numerous European singers who have a lot of respect for the graduates of American schools. Like a lot of them agree, and I'm surprised to hear it because I figured the Europeans would all favor their own schools where they come from, but a lot of them say no, the American schools are better, which surprises me to hear it from them.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But I've heard that from French people, from Germans on multiple occasions. I'm not going to say whether that's objectively true or not. I've never attended a European conservatory. I would say the Americans are pragmatic. I would say the Americans are also kind of guided, for better or worse. Our context is that if we try to sing as Americans in an American opera houses are huge.
Yes,
And,
that has a lot to do with it. And they're often not built for opera.
Yeah. So
they're built for some other
acoustically
thing.
favorable
Yeah.
or unfavorable, and often in the range of 3,000 seats. And some of the biggest houses in Europe it's considered huge if it's 2,000. The Met is 4,000, 4,500?
I think it's 4,000 with standing room.
So the Met's 4,000. Cincinnati, Utah, Seattle, these are all around 3,000 seats.
Arizona.
And so that reality kind of guides the aesthetic, which for Americans is like maximum resonance, maximum projection,
Right.
per effort.
Right.
And so I think of the Americans are kind of obsessed with technique and projection.
And from also from the American standpoint, they're much more concerned about the visual aesthetic as well. So it seems like the American singers, there's much more demand to be in physical shape and also be a great actor.
Yeah. Would you say, I don't know this, but I would say anecdotally, the barahunk thing seems to be more an American thing than a European thing.
I think so.
Whereas, like, if you're a lyric baritone in America and you're not in the gym 4 times a week, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I think it's all this cultural phenomenon is taken over where, like, now you kind of have to do it.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it. So, like, if you're doing these virile young roles of lyric, baritone men, then you got to go be a big, slim, muscular guy. What a terrible thing. But, well, not a terrible thing, but I just don't think that has to be relevant to someone's success.
I mean, especially I think with the regional houses, and I think it's because of the audiences that they're getting. The regional houses in the U.S., I think their audiences are a little less educated by the voice. They're more, they can sort of see what they like. Well, he looks like a pretty good looking guy.
Yeah.
What I'm used to seeing on TV sitcoms, things like that. And, he can sort of act. I can tell what he's acting about kind of thing, and the voice is almost, secondary or tertiary to that.
I think in America, outside the big cities and even within the big cities, if you have an audience that's attending Cenerentola, Cinderella by Rossini, most of them are seeing it for the first time in their lives.
Yes, absolutely.
There's only X% that have ever seen it before. Now, you go to a Bohème, maybe some of them have seen it twice, and certainly in a regional company, 90% of people in that house are seeing that opera for the first and maybe only time in their lives.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And so, but when I did Marriage of Figaro in Mönchengladbach, I had audience members going up to me. It's like, oh, I like this a lot. When I saw it in Essen, it was like this.
Yeah.
The average opera goer in Germany, when they go see Carmen, they're seeing it for the 3rd or 4th time in their lives.
I would say more like the 9th or the 10th time.
Because there's just so many productions and so many theaters nearby, and so many opportunities. And if you like opera at all, you could just keep going over and over and over again. And so there is what would I call it, like a culture of opera.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Germans can a little bit more get away with Regietheater. That's a whole nother topic, but that's where they'll do really political, sexual interpretations of the direction of the presentation of the opera that may or may not match the original story at all. But because the audience has seen it before, they have a baseline to compare it to.
Right.
They've already seen Don Giovanni 2 or 3 times. So when they put it on a spaceship, they're like, oh, He's going in this direction with it.
Yeah.
But if you do the really wacky stuff in America, it would just be too far from left field.
yeah.
It's their first time to see the opera at all. There's no
exactly.
baseline for it to happen. You know.
Yeah. Or you have sort of more older sort of opera goers. Usually they're part of like the donor class. That it's more of a nostalgic thing, and they don't want to see something modern. They want to see, La Boheme set in the traditional time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and there's definitely, due to the tastes of the people attending for sure. I kind of dig the Regie Theater thing in Germany, but I know that I may not be in the majority with that. I see it as a risk reward kind of thing. Sometimes you swing and miss. But when you get it, you really get it. And it's something, above and beyond what you would normally get.
Right. A lot of booing at those.
Yeah, sure. And what's interesting is they'll actually take their time to applaud for the singers.
Yes.
And then in the premiere, the regie team, that is the director, the lighting designer, they'll come on and they'll boo them like crazy, and then wait for them to leave, like that, and then continue clapping for the cast.
It's really unbelievable. And I'm trying to line up a couple of directors to come on the podcast to sort of talk about that concept, and because in the States it's like there is some booing in the States. But not nearly as much as there is in Europe. It's like, even if somebody doesn't like you, whether you're the singer, the conductor, or the director, you rarely get booed.
Well, it's one thing to really enjoy something, but it's one thing to be so passionate about it that you're upset when it doesn't meet your expectations.
Right.
And you actually have to get up there and raise your voice and like disturb the performance.
Right.
So in a way, those guys are actually big fans? Question mark.
Yeah, they're sort of demanding, do better, opera.
I'm not praising them, because it just really sucks for you grunt workers like you and I to know that there are people out there who just want to take heads, if we don't meet their expectations.
Right.
And it's, again, as far as emotional health goes, it's something that we have to like put far away from our minds.
My mantra about that is, look, they paid their money.
Yeah.
Let them boo.
Yeah.
Still going to collect my paycheck, and that's what I focus on, the next job and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, they're passionate.
So anyway, what do you think, buddy? I think we're over 3 hours on this one.
Are you kidding? Seriously?
No.
My God. I just can't shut up, clearly.
It's 4:15.
We've hardly covered anything.
Well, fortunately you live in Berlin, and I know I'm going to have you back on this podcast. So
wow. Well, we'll keep it dense next time.
No. I like the expanded stuff. Let's get into it, I mean,
all right.
I think we had some great conversation today, and I think a lot of people are going to be really psyched about this, and your radio voice, of course, is perfect. So,
well, you're welcome.
I might have to employ you because I still don't have any theme music for this podcast.
Right. Well, no, I got your theme music right here.
Yeah, exactly. Cigawi.
Yeah. Wait. Cigawi. You're welcome, Eric. You're listening to Cigawi.
Oh, perfect. That's perfect. All right, everybody. For Eric Fennell, Andrew Nolen.
It's a pleasure.
We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.